You're dealing with weapons that would make a hydrogen bomb look like a tinker toy. It's the largest criminal, corrupt organization in the history of the earth. Most people have a price.
Yeah.
In either blackmail, threats, or money, or position. I said, sit on it and rotate.
Why are you so controversial?
Just let me finish. Let me finish the story. You keep interrupting me, but I will tell you if you'll let me finish. The really high-tech stuff, they've slammed into a box. It would liberate every home, every car, every factory, every country.
Yeah. Into
energy independence, no pollution, and no poverty. Here's a warning to you money-grubbing whores. It's gonna be open sourced. So I've been doing this for one hell of a long time, since I was 35. I thought everything that went bump in the night was alien. I did. And it wasn't until I started having people come forward who said, oh, we piloted these. And then I had guys come forward who had actually been on the abduction squad, made to look like aliens.
Whoa.
And they said, oh,
You've
no.
You've met people who've
committed those crimes.
Wow.
Yeah, and they feel terrible later in life. The folks who know about this, they need to come clean truthfully soon. This is getting very serious right now. Whether you're in Congress, the Senate, the public, or someone on your podcast, they need to be arrested and tried for treason and sedition against the United States.
Does that involve storming Area 51 and Dugway and the right pad, or what does this involve? Yeah. Literally.
This week's long-awaited American alchemist is Dr. Stephen Greer. Love him or hate him, this medical doctor turned UFO truth seeker has played a big part in modern disclosure that can't be ignored. If you are trying to get closer to the truth, you just can't really throw out his foundational research, the Disclosure Project archive, and his whistleblower testimonies. He's gathered more firsthand UFO witnesses than anyone on the planet, and humanity owes him a debt for that. In my opinion, speaking to Dr. Greer is like panning for gold. If you get past some of his antics, there's a ton of value there. I've been told by people not to do this interview because of those antics. I don't really care for being told who I should and shouldn't speak with. Talking to someone on a podcast is not in any way an endorsement of all of their beliefs, so I decided to sit down with him. The one caveat I will include here is Dr. Greer goes after just about everybody in UFO world and hurls out a ton of ad hominems. If I had tried to perfectly referee all of his accusations, this would have turned into an unintelligible and endless argument about who the bad faith actors are in UFO world. Although I generally agree with him, there are probably many. So instead, I tried to show appreciation for his incontrovertible contributions to UFO disclosure and to learn what I could from him. So without further ado or disclaimers, please enjoy this special long-form episode with this week's American alchemist, Dr. Stephen Greer.
I'm here with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm so excited to do this. This has been a long time coming for me because I've explored a lot in UFO world.
Sure.
And you are really responsible for a lot of disclosure. I mean, most of the whistleblowers who've come out have had a touch point with you before they've gone public.
Right.
And so Disclosure Project is your kind of organization. You have an archive with terabytes of data, documents that go incredibly deep on the cover-up. You've also made a couple of great movies on Acknowledged, The Lost Century, about suppressed science.
And the new one that just came out, The Battle for Disclosure.
And The Battle for Disclosure. Yeah. And then you've given me this incredible, this briefing.
For the president. We cleaned it up.
Okay.
And redacted things.
Okay.
And then made it available to the public so everyone can get it now. So you'll have 90+% of what the new president has.
That's pretty awesome. The Disclosure Project Briefing Document 2025. So have you spoken to Trump or his team, or?
I can't talk about the names, but very senior people relevant to this issue and national security, yes. So as soon as the election happened, even before. So some of his closest advisors and major funders have been on my team and are supportive of this. And some of them that are new to that world, and just to be clear to everyone, I'm nonpartisan, so I've dealt with all the way back to Clinton and the Obama and John Podesta, all the way forward to now. So my institute and the Disclosure Project is completely a nonpartisan, has to be. And not only nonpartisan, it's global, because I do the same thing for Europe, Australia, Great Britain. I was just in Great Britain in September. So we're assiduously, carefully nonpartisan. With that said, this administration, I think the first administration since Bill Clinton tried to fix this problem in his first term is most open to perhaps pursuing it. We'll see.
That would be very exciting. Well, this brings up this kind of perennial question because I think a lot of people associate this topic with the quote-unquote deep state. And they also associate Bill Clinton with the quote-unquote deep state. And so how deep is the deep state that deals with this topic? If you have Bill Clinton kind of knocking on the door of the program and not getting let in, what are we talking about as far as a power structure here?
Well, it's exactly what Eisenhower described when he went out of office in 61. In January of 61, when he left and Jack Kennedy came in. And he said, beware the military-industrial complex. It'll become a threat to our way of life, and excessive secrecy will destroy democracy. I'm paraphrasing, but you can read the speech. The same thing that Jack Kennedy said in a number of speeches. And then we know for a fact, and I know the people who have the actionable intelligence on this, Jack Kennedy was killed over this issue. And the constellation of programs attached to UAPs, and particularly the science and technology branch of it, which we'll get into. That's two big pillars here, keeping it secret. They want people to go out publicly, and we know who they are, who will spin the subject in the direction of it being an alien threat for the purpose of a totalitarian superstate uniting the world against aliens, which is a total hoax and nonsense. And that's, it's like the movie Independence Day or The War of the Worlds or whatever. Like when Will Smith goes, let's kick alien butt, right? That whole script was like out of CIA central scripting casting. Not that Will Smith is, he's a great guy, but it was reached out to us and very interested. But I think that the trajectory of this goes back to the late 50s, probably earlier, but definitely the decapitation of the presidency happened on Eisenhower's watch. And we know that Jackie Gleason knew this, and some people that in my early days as a young doctor when I first started this, I got to know some people who had known Eisenhower. And like one of our whistleblowers way back then, when we kicked off the whole disclosure project effort in the mid-90s, it was called Project Starlight, code name, because we were private. And then it went public in 2001 with the National Press Club that had 800 million people see it. And then 9/11 happened a few months later as a direct consequence, which I don't want to get into that much, but this was going to get blown wide open.
Interesting.
And they needed a diversion, so they created something called 9/11, and that's been stuck in that world for 20 years. But what's fascinating about this so-called deep state is that it was a carryover out of World War II. And it started when a man who was one of the original founders of CIA, Allen Dulles, it was OSS during World War II. The other thing was a guy named Paul Mellon. And Mellon was one of the few billionaires in the world at the end of World War II. I mean, having billions of dollars in 45, amazing. So Paul Mellon's grandson, who is John Warner IV, the son of Senator John Warner, I got to know years ago. And he said, look, first time I walked into his house, it's at the Watergate, it's a huge place on the water. And John Warner IV, not his father, the Senator Warner, but John Warner, I walk in, he goes, oh, my whole family are fascists. I went, what? He says, oh, yeah. So his grandfather, Paul Mellon, so Warner, his father had married Paul Mellon's daughter. So it's all very familial. This runs family way back. And he said, yeah, I mean, he was a huge supporter of Adolf Hitler and fascism. So was Henry Ford. So was Watson of IBM. So these were all hardcore. And so was Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's dad. They were known to be big supporters of fascism.
They were at like Union Bank, Brown Brothers, Harriman.
And all that. Chase Manhattan, the whole thing. So that went put into kind of stasis for a few years till we won, I call it the Battle of World War II. But then those people sort of covertly surfaced after World War II.
Well, there's a story of John Warner IV, and he's having martinis, I believe, with Paul Mellon, his
That's what I'm talking
grandfather.
about. And he
Exactly.
admitted this. And he admitted going over and getting a Nazi disc.
That's right.
That was not a ramjet. It was actually electrogravitic.
And my grandfather said, look, you know, we were in a facility, a hangar, and we saw, you know, a German flying disc. And I said, you know, oh, is that the one that was cobbled together with 6 BMW jet engines? And he laughed and he said, no.
Now, some of them are extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
I don't use the word alien because people think it's someone from Guatemala or something. But an ETV, an extraterrestrial vehicle, or NHI craft, non-human intelligence craft, that's not what he brought back. It was a Nazi early prototype, but it wasn't stable. It took us from 1945 to 1954 to master what's called gravity control.
Yeah.
And I have a man who is a whistleblower, but privately, who is the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs, who has passed away, so I'll say his name is Richard Foch, F-O-C-H. Yeah. Rick had been in the vault and saw the documents for the date we mastered gravity control, and it was October 1954. So beginning in the late 50s forward, many of the UAPs, UFOs, whatever the new fake word is they're using for these things, that's also out of CIA. We'll talk about the word usage and how it's a mind colonization. It's a mind fuck, excuse my language. But to think how these guys think, right? You had to get at their level. And so from there forward, they said they had captured or shot down a couple of ET craft, but they weren't starting from zero. They already had that, right? The Nazi disc. They had the T. Townsend Brown electrogravitics, which became the foundation of RAND Corporation, by the way. And so
how do you know? That's interesting because I know Townsend Brown did some experiments in the 60s, right before his work got kind of covertly transferred to Northrop Grumman for the B-2, and he did a presentation for RAND Corporation, and then something happened. And so
but that started in the 20s.
Well, his experiments, yeah.
Okay. So in the late 1920s, they were using very high voltage material, resonant frequencies, certain frequencies at very high voltage, but low power. Not a lot of current.
Yeah, low current, yeah.
Low current. If you understand electromagnetism, and power is, you know, the current times the voltage, right? The fact is that he was able to hit a sweet spot with certain crystalline materials.
High K dielectrics.
Yeah, and that would then levitate.
Yeah.
Float. That was 28, 29. It was reproduced in Germany in the Kautsky-Frost experiment. All this is in, by the way, the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. We've released it all. DPIarchive.com. Is that it? DPIarchive.com. And so I go, anyone who wants to see it, it's there. If you can read, you'll learn it. But, so that percolated along. So the covert programs with this go way back to the turn of the last century, late 1800s, early 1900s. There are still top secret files on this issue from the late 1800s and early 1900s. We know this.
Wow.
Way back.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
And how do you know that it goes that far back?
Because one of the very top people since 1979 at the CIA who's worked this issue is an intel source for me.
So what is the secrecy? Because we associate it with the CIA, which was formed in 47. Even OSS was 42 through 45.
Yeah.
So like, if this was like late 19th century, is it Office of Naval Intelligence? Is it secret societies? Is it both?
What's up, guys? I want to tell you about my new favorite boots. These things are epic. I've been wearing these everywhere. They're called Brunt. They're insanely comfortable and durable. These things last for years, and they're super versatile. I wear them for hiking, for hanging out. They look pretty swaggy if you're going out. They even look good in work meetings. They feel incredibly comfortable. There's no annoying break-in period. They just kind of form fit to your foot right off the bat. They're lightweight. You don't have to lug them around, but they're also super weather resistant, waterproof, and durable. Brunt is committed to making sure you're 100% satisfied with your new gear. With over 500,000 customers already on board, these boots are the best in the category. Take it from me. Brunt makes the most epic, durable, and comfortable work boots. For a limited time, our listeners get $10 off at Brunt by using code Jesse at checkout. Just head to bruntworkwear.com and use code Jesse and you're all set. Even better, Brunt lets you try all their products on the job risk-free. Just go to bruntworkwear.com and use code Jesse for $10 off. Again, that's bruntworkwear.com, code Jesse. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you.
What are we
No,
talking
it
about?
was military intelligence and scientists who were under contract, and there were top secret things going on. See, people forget Nikola Tesla, not the fake Tesla cars with a little toy battery you plug in. No, I'm not talking about the fake Tesla. I'm talking about Nikola Tesla. You know, as Einstein was asked, what's it like being a genius? And he goes, I wouldn't know. You should ask Nikola Tesla. See, I think that was the real genius
I agree with you.
of the 20th century.
Him and Townsend Brown, in my opinion.
And, yes, and Faraday, Maxwell, they all had stumbled across this electromagnetic effect. So this is when I say we have the lost century. Everyone go see this documentary. It's a documentation of 100 years of lost technologies that are really advanced. And I don't mean the crap out of Silicon Valley. It's just peripheral garbage. You know, iPhones, all that stuff. It's just, that's not high tech. It's none of it. So the really high tech stuff, they've slammed into a box because it would liberate, this is a libertarian's dream, it would liberate every home, every car, every factory, every country into energy independence, no pollution, and no poverty. But then that undercuts this uber elite oligarchy, the super powerful $1 trillion. I'm not talking Elon Musk, a couple $100 billion. Nobody cares about $200 billion. We're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets.
Can I say where I might disagree with you? I think we have these novel effects in the black around Townsend Brown, electrogravitics, things like that, extended electrodynamics. And then I'm not so sure. You might be right, but I'm not sure that we have like scalable 0-point energy that could like take out the grid. Do you have high confidence that we have?
I have 100% knowledge of it, and absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely, we have it. And you know what? The CEO of a Fortune 50 company, I'm sorry, chairman, not CEO, who's retired now, has approached us. Last year, as soon as he did, he had a Wet Works assassination team threaten to kill him and his entire family and grandchildren.
Wow.
So he's 80 now, but he wants to come forward, and the first thing he said is, we could have had free energy for the world, and he, quote, decades and decades ago. Absolutely true.
Is this company a defense prime, or is it?
I won't comment, except it is one of it's a household name in the United States.
Wow.
And this is the former chairman.
And he came to you saying,
yes,
I want to get this out.
Yes, but of course, this is why we'll get to this in a little while, why some of the executive orders and things in Congress we've been working on provides ironclad protection, not just legal, but physical, like federal marshal protection or Secret Service, to the HVT, high value targets, very high value whistleblowers, because we have several categories of whistleblowers. I have 760 some whistleblowers that I've debriefed. Some of them are at such a high level that they're in serious risk. This is not a conspiracy theory of just being whacked, right, killed, and their families. And we have to protect them. So the president needs to sign an executive order, and the Congress needs to enshrine in law, which they almost did in December of 23, a little over a year ago. But that got gutted in the reconciliation of the National Defense Authorization Act. And the part of it that I had helped consult on for Senate Intelligence Committee, because I've been in the SCIF there and done things for them, that got taken out. And the reconciliation by some devils who are in the House of Representatives. We know who they are. And one of them got removed.
Mike Turner.
He got removed as head of, because I blew the whistle on it. I said, that guy out.
Well, he represented...
Because here's the problem.
Yeah.
If you are carrying water for a criminal conspiracy, a transnational corrupt organization, which is what this is, that is committing murder, abductions. Alien abductions are covert human programs, by the way, 100%. I mean, that's the other big secret nobody knows. Then you're also committing embezzlement of monies, black budget money that's being embezzled, that the president and Congress have no knowledge of. you're murdering people. Take the whole federal penal code, throw it at these people. So where I am at this point, because in June I'll be 70. So I've been doing this for one hell of a long time, since I was 35. My view of it at this point is we're going to have to get serious against these criminal elements. But if you're carrying water for them, if you're one of their shills or cutout, whether you're in Congress, the Senate, the public, or someone on your podcast, they need to be arrested and tried for treason and sedition against the United States. I'm going on the record and say that. And this is seriously being discussed. So I'm issuing this as a warning. This chicanery and nonsense, one way or another, is going to come to a screeching halt, because there are people, not just me, I've been saying this for 30 years. You go back and see what I saw in the meetings with the Clinton people back in 95, 93, 94, 95. I briefed the CIA director for Clinton in December 13th of 93.
Wow.
So, I mean, before probably you were born. But the point I'm making is that this is a really huge problem. So even if you're a low-level operative, you're just carrying water for this messaging, right? And disinforming the public or blocking bills, you are part of a criminal operation. And RICO, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization, conspiracy, can be invoked and grab them all up.
Speaking of Clinton, his Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Chris Mellon, has been responsible for pushing a lot of, disclosure post-2017, this article with Leslie Kean, these videos that have come out, he and Lou Elizondo in the New York Times. How do you square that with Paul Mellon being one of the founders of the CIA?
Because all three of the people you named are being told to tell part of the truth. And the partial truth is actually more damaging than saying nothing. So if you tell people, one, we don't know what these are. So all three of them say, oh, it's a UAP, we don't know what they are. Bull, malarkey. We're in Texas, cow pods. I mean, it's just nonsense. We know what they are. There are extraterrestrial vehicles, NHI vehicles. There are man-made ones. That's the majority that are seen now. That's the biggest secret. And then there are things that are extra-dimensional. They're not from another star system, from another dimension. They're not craft, they're beings. All that gets put into a blender and confused on purpose.
Are there any time travelers?
To gaslight. Well, time and space is fungible, right? But let's stay on this for a minute. So if you're told, say this, but then misdirect the public on that, let me tell you how great counterintelligence works. You take truth, put it on the outside like a sweet coating. Inside this nice little piece of candy is the poison pill. So they'll come out and they'll say, these are real, but we don't know what they are, and we don't know how they fly. Big lie. Or they'll say, they're a threat to the national security. Well, the man-made ones are, because they're running by a transnational criminal organization out of the control of the White House and the Congress.
What is that organization? Do we have a name for it?
Oh, it used to be called MJ12. The last, I know it's been, the last good name I can pinpoint on a document from the 90s from the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, was MAGIC.
MAGIC.
Which is the Majority Joint Intelligence Committee, or just MAGI.
And they're a global, they're a transnational organization.
Oh, absolutely.
That coincides with different governments, national governments, but basically supersedes them, has power over them?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's what Senator Inouye, who was a Democrat, who was chairman of the committee looking into Iran-Contra back in the 80s during the Reagan years, Hawaiian. Yeah. And he said, he's the one who said, there exists a shadow or secret government that's above the U.S. government, that has its own funding mechanism, its own Air Force, its own Navy, that's above the law and free from the law itself. I'm almost quoting. You can look it up. It's in our archive.
How do they stay coordinated in the world of like smartphones and stuff where, the
regular guys at NSA don't have the level to keep that organization out because they have technologies that penetrate time-space that go beyond electromagnetic conventional encryption. So,
Do you think you've met any members of
Oh,
this
yes.
Majestic 12 or
of course.
Magic?
Sure.
Okay.
I have, for sure, for sure.
Interesting.
And that's why, back in 92,
Yeah.
well, I was on Patrick Bet-David's show a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, and he said, what kind of, I said, well, in 92, General Stubblebine offered me $2 billion
Yeah.
to be part of his little cabal of goose-stepping fools. And
What did he say? So Stubblebine is what, Army counter intel?
He was, I think at one time he had been head of Army Intelligence and Special Forces, and whole career. But his career dealing with UFOs goes back to the 60s.
Really?
Yes.
So when did
So I had
Stubblebine?
an intel source who had worked with him way back then.
When did-
Now remember, this is 1992, so this is 33 years ago in May, this
Yeah.
May. And Bet David thought, there's no way that was a serious, I said, oh yeah, it was. Because he knew I could make a lot of trouble for them. And that would have been a bargain, $2 billion, because I've caused a lot more trouble.
Did they ever offer to show you a UFO so that you would stop talking?
No, I mean, look, no amount of money or threats are
Yeah.
going to get me to stop the mission I'm on. That's to bring the truth out of this and let us start a real golden age where we have all these technologies.
Have you
with
ever
a
seen
super advanced society?
Have you ever seen a UFO not in the air but in a hangar in like a facility?
Taken to one of those places. I've been in places where they have been. I have not seen this. Yeah.
Okay.
But I have many, many whistleblowers. See, one of my great gripes with the House Oversight Committee,
Yeah.
they have not had a single legitimate whistleblower up there who's a direct first-hand person. And I find it very, very, very odd.
Yeah.
Because I've met and discussed this with Grush and Luna and others, and I go, here's a hard drive,
Yeah.
unredacted.
Well, you've spoken to David Grush?
Yeah, well, okay, let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
I met with Grush when he was still an undercover operative,
Okay.
and no one knew he was. His bosses were the ones I was providing intel to that helped him and other people get to find what he found.
Who were his bosses?
I can't talk about that. There are
Okay.
people the Senate Intelligence Committee and Senate Armed Services had authorized, and a bill had been written to form ARROW at the Pentagon and to have investigations on this. So the bosses in charge of that, at that level of intel, were the people who wanted him to go out. And one of them set up this meeting between me and Mr. Grush.
Do you like David Grush? Do you find him to be an honest actor?
Oh, yeah, he absolutely, what he said about what he found, but he's secondhand. My whistleblowers are direct firsthand.
He has said that he's actually had firsthand knowledge since getting that critique. So, and I don't know exactly what that is, but
Well, he's been pulled into some, but the problem is he got attached to a gentleman named Luis Elizondo, who is mainly there to provide partial truth. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So if you put out some information and then attach the disinformation to it, there's a threat. We need to go to World War III in an alien battle. We don't have these technologies ourselves. We've never developed that advance. When I have direct people who've worked on, built, and flown the man-made UFOs, right? So these are your high-value target whistleblowers.
you have a whistleblower who's flown an alien reproduction vehicle, a UFO that we've
Yes,
reverse
and
engineered.
more importantly, the man who managed all the pilots.
Did he say
who
anything?
flew them out of Edwards Air Force Base.
Did he say
out of
what
the
it-
Edwards complex?
Did he say what it was like to fly in a UFO?
Well, they're controlled from 1G. Wow. So in other words, they could be going 200,000 miles per hour, stop, make a turn, and now if you were in a conventional aircraft, even if it could go that fast, your brains would come out through your nose.
Yeah, you died
right?
from the
They'd kill you.
G-force.
Oh yeah, G-forces would just splatter you. But they can control. So really, what they are, they're moving in an electromagnetic field, space-time bubble, so that they can move as if there's none of that gravitational effect.
Did he say he was feeling like he would feel like he was going fast, or it
You
was
can
kind of
feel mostly like 1G or a little lighter.
Wow.
So yeah, you don't feel that centripetal force or centrifugal,
Aren't you worried you're gonna hit something at that speed? Like it's just so.
Well, if they do
Not-
it right, they've had some terrible disasters. I know two different people who've been on retrieval teams of the triangular ones. So Northrop Grumman, my uncle, was on the team that designed the lunar module. Put the
Really?
first man on the moon.
Oh, that's amazing.
And his whole career was Northrop Grumman. Now, this was not his portfolio, but he heard things, right? Because he was a senior project manager. Eventually moved out from Long Island at Bethpage, where they actually designed and built the lunar module that landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong, to California. But this was not his, because those special projects, let's call them, within Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Skunk Works are hermetically sealed from their normal business of jets and rockets and whatever, the normal stuff. That's true of all these corporate contractors.
It has to be, because I think about China's eating our lunch in hypersonics right now.
Right.
So how is that possible and consistent with the fact that we have hyperlight drive ships? Those two things. But so they just don't talk to each other. You have these secret black programs.
They don't even know each other exists. They don't know each other exists. And so the problem with that level of secrecy that Eisenhower foretold is that entity can then take on a life of its own because of their technological capabilities, but not only in energy and propulsion, but in surveillance, right? So we haven't talked about that yet. And this is where you get into the really high end of psionics that Jake talks about a little bit, but I've been talking about since 1990. So the cheap end of it is the remote viewing programs that the CIA had, right? That's the innate abilities, and what Bob Monroe had with HemiSync, remote viewing, what we do with CE5 contact. But the high end of it's an electromagnetic transdimensional interface with consciousness and mind and technology.
So do you think they have mind control techniques?
Today, I want to share something that's become a game changer for me personally. Qualia Senolytic. Have you ever heard about senolytics? It's a revolutionary class of ingredients that researchers discovered less than a decade ago, and they're already being hailed as one of the biggest breakthroughs in promoting healthy aging. This is where Qualia Senolytic shines. As we age, our bodies accumulate what scientists call senescent cells, also known as zombie cells. These cells just sit there, hogging resources and dragging down your energy, recovery, and even mental clarity. Think of it like pruning a plant. You've got to remove the dead leaves to get the rest to thrive. Since I started taking Qualia Senolytic, I've felt a huge boost in energy and productivity. I'm sharper, more focused, and genuinely feel like I've rolled the clock back. And here's the kicker. You only need to take it 2 days a month. This science-backed formula is non-GMO, vegan, and designed to work synergistically to help your body shed those zombie cells. And with a 100-day money-back guarantee, there's zero risk in trying it out for yourself. So resist aging at the cellular level and try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/Jesse for up to 50% off, and use code Jesse at checkout for an additional 15% off. For your convenience, Qualia Senolytic is also available at select GNC locations near you. That's QUALIA life.com/Jesse for an extra 15% off your purchase. Thanks so much to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode.
Oh, sure.
So then why aren't this? Because
it's not like, it's not like some science fiction. You hit a button and someone becomes an automaton.
Right.
I mean, the automatons, like Jake Barber talked about, who are these P3 operators, go through a rigorous training program so they can become almost like a human-machine interface between the people controlling them and the ET vehicles. So that's a very elaborate program. But what I tell people is that in the mid to late 50s, I had met a man who invented kind of a headset like he's wearing that would basically put you in a state in consciousness so you could remote view distant places. 56.
Wow.
And he offered it to me. I said, this is going to be too hot to handle. It's dangerous enough what we're doing. If I have that, I'm a dead man. So, but the man was in his 80s by then, because that was 56. This would probably have been in 93 or 4. All kinds of people started coming to me in the early 90s after we had 4 ET craft materialize in the air in Florida near Pensacola. My whole intention was simply to go out and attempt to make peaceful contact with groups of people with the ETs. But once the intelligence community saw that we knew how to do that, they came after me like a pack of Rottweilers.
So yeah, I want to tell that story, like
It was
how
a
you got
nasty
it.
bit of business.
So you were an ER doctor, and then did you just feel inspired to start going out and doing CE5 protocols, or how did this all begin?
Well, that's a very long story. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Just so people know, I just had emergency surgery last night for a ruptured appendix.
Yeah, it's amazing
And-
that he's here. It's
I mean, it was
remarkable.
I'm an open book, folks, but I mean, it was like, oh my God. And
I
as a
can't-
doctor, an emergency doctor, I go, this is bad. My assistant Raven, when we go straight from Houston and drive to the Texas University Hospital.
I can't believe it.
And a friend of a friend knew a doctor, a surgeon there who could like open me up and do it. But
Wow.
you know, it was, you know, I got home from the hospital.
You seem great to me.
Oh, well. People say, you're a fucking machine. Anyway, but, well, you know what I told, Jay, I texted Jake before
Barber?
I got here.
Yeah.
And I said, Winston Churchill said, never, never, never give up.
Yeah, I love
So you
that.
just keep going. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. But no, I've been a little woozy. Hopefully I'm being coherent here.
No, you're being super coherent.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I'm having some matcha.
Yeah, there
tea.
you go.
Thank
You're good. You're on point. So okay, so the origin story. So you're an ER doctor.
Well, I had a sighting first.
Okay, you had a
you know,
sighting.
when I was 8 or 9.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And it was
right.
a bunch of kids in the neighborhood, and my twin sister in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I grew up. And because I did a Chapel Hill residency, so I'm a North Carolina guy. And broad daylight, perfectly seamless disc. About 1963, probably.
Wow.
63, 4, around the time Kennedy was killed. And I went, wow, that's a UFO. As a little kid. Now, my parents thought we were just like making stuff up, right? Parents should believe their children when they see stuff. Anyway, so I ignited an interest that I had lifelong. Then my uncle, I just mentioned, was working on putting the first man on the moon, which happened in '69 when I was 14. I just turned 14. And so I got very interested in all of that. And then when I was 17, it was my last year of high school, I got very sick. I had an injury and got infected. And I grew up, people don't know this, in a shack, very poor, no heat, no air conditioning, had a kerosene heater in the floor. We were starving on the streets, literally. We had all kinds of problems. So I ended up getting on my own and had a apartment in high school. I was tall and hairy, so everyone thought I was 20 when I was 16. Hilarious story. And so I washed pots and pans at a Red Lobster to get through high school, and then would bicycle to school, but I got worn down, and I got very sick. I had a near-death experience. So my parents didn't believe in God, didn't believe in anything, didn't believe in a soul, didn't believe in an afterlife, didn't believe in consciousness. And then I went, well, were they wrong? There's a whole new cosmos out here. So I had this amazing near-death experience, which introduced me to the whole science of consciousness, right? So about a month later, or a couple months later, on my 18th birthday, I learned meditation. Back in the day, now I'm dating myself, 1973, when the whole zeitgeist was transcendental meditation and the Maharishi and all that.
Yeah.
So I learned to meditate. And I had these amazing experiences in consciousness, like cosmic consciousness, beautiful experiences. And that's where the near-death experience was, well, thank you, God, that actually helped get me on a path. But 6 months later, October of '73, I'm up in the mountains of North Carolina. If you're in the Blue Ridge Mountains up near Boone, and there's so I climbed up this mountain up over 5,000 feet. And I'm up there before sunset to meditate. And I look up, and that same craft, well, it looked the same. I can't say it was the same one, that I saw when I was a kid, when I was 8. Now I'm 18, just turned 18, appears in the afternoon sky, crystal clear October day.
What did the craft look like?
It was a disc, a seamless disc, not a thin disc, but like, kind of that shape. And seamless, the sun shining off of it, fully materialized, and then it didn't move off, it just disappeared.
Wow.
Because the interstellar ones could do it, they can be here and just boom. So I went, oh, they're back. I didn't think anything about it, right? I said, oh, that's cool. another sighting. So I sit to meditate and go into deep meditation. And at the end of it, I come out of it, and it was very long, longer than I thought. It had gotten dark. So this was near sunset when I saw the craft, and it's October '73. And it was kind of beautiful because I looked up, and you could see the whole Milky Way galaxy. It was crystal clear. And you're up over 5,000 feet up in the Blue Ridge. And at that moment, a beautiful thought came and said, beware what a beautiful universe God has made. And with that, I'd noticed over the rise of the top of the crest of the mountain where I was, there was a fire tower I was sitting at the base of. The locals called it a fire tower. North Carolina, it's a fire tower, not a fire tower. I looked, there was a glow, and then there was this creature that came over. And she, I don't know, was maybe about 5 feet tall, beautiful deer-like eyes, came over and touched me on my right shoulder. And at that time, I had long hair and a lot of hair. And then my hair went boing, and it just stuck out. And then boom, sort of vanished on this craft for about, I thought it was 40 minutes or so, or half hour to an hour somewhere, and it was like 4 hours.
Wow.
Because time, space is different. And that's where we sort of co-created and invented the CE5 contact protocols we use.
So you kind of downloaded it from that experience.
Yeah, it was collaborative. It was like me experiencing that state of consciousness as a human in 1973, and them understanding humans from where they are, which is thousands of years in the future.
Wow.
Right? So it was this very, people say metaphysical. It wasn't. It was very physical, but very real, but very almost like a lucid dream. Because when you go into that state, it's almost like a lucid interface between 3D and 4 and 5 and 6D. You know, I mean, it's very abstract in a lot of ways. But
are there ancient versions of this protocol, or
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Native peoples. I think this is all such a revelation to just the last few hundred years since the scientific revolution, where we threw the science of consciousness and spirituality out with the bathwater.
Right.
Right? Because it fell into the Middle Ages as a superstition, and then burning witches at the stake and all that the scientific revolution said, we don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to come into a time where the science of consciousness and this understanding is going to merge. And I know Jake Barber and others understand this with other, what we call science, because it is a science. And that's what I discovered by studying the Vedas and the ancient Sanskrit from India. It's not Hinduism, by the way, predates Hinduism and Buddhism. And so after this experience...
Don't they have flying saucers in the text as well?
Oh, absolutely. The Bhagavad Gita and the ancient the Vimanas.
Yeah.
And these are thousands of years old. They predate Christ, Krishna, they predate all those.
And there's like spinning Mercury at the center or something?
Well, that's maybe.
Okay.
You know, but definitely there were objects like that recorded thousands of years ago. So I said, well, there's really nothing that new under the sun, right? You know, but
so at what point do all these intelligence and military people enter your life? So you have Colonel John Alexander, who has a long history in ufology, often debunking things, trying or attempting to debunk things.
Well, that's his job. Let people do what they're told to do.
Okay.
Look, I mean, if you're someone on the payroll and you're told you do this or we kill you, or if you do it, we'll make you very wealthy and comfortable for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Most people aren't going to do what I'm going to do.
Is that why
I said sit on it and rotate to stubble by? I'm sorry, it'd be vulgar.
The $2 billion.
But, yeah.
Do you have that in writing, the offer?
Oh God, of course not. Don't be naive. No, but I have witness to it. I mean, he then went to my wife, tried to convince her. But what I'm saying is that most people have a price.
Yeah.
In either blackmail, threats, or money, or position, or power. Like I've known a couple billionaires, all they wanted to do is get access to the secret technologies and understand and see stuff. Bigelow was one of those. But I knew him at the Rockefeller Ranch in '93. right? When Rockefeller hosted all these folks. And
Lawrence Rockefeller, right?
Yeah,
he
yeah.
hosted. And did he fund some of your work as well?
Early on, he did, and it
yeah.
got intercepted by some people on his team who were Knox, non-official covers for the CIA.
It's so interesting, though. Rockefeller, you have Mellon, Rockefeller, like all these old families seem very interested in this sort of tech.
Not just interested, but involved.
Involved, okay.
Now, Lawrence was the philosopher king of the family. David.
He seemed like a good guy, Lawrence.
Totally.
Yeah.
But he was surrounded by devils. These people they don't know it. They get surrounded by these operatives. And it's like, the expression, smile, smile, and be a villain.
I've never heard that, but interesting.
Well, in literature. Boy, we need to reinstitute education. In Sorry.
Catch me up.
I know, I'm terrible. Imagine growing up, my 4 daughters, oh my God. If I used a word they didn't know, I'd say atavistic. Go look it up.
I think we need more shaming around cultural illiteracy, like I just displayed. So I appreciate that. I'm now extra motivated.
No, I'm just ribbing you. Don't take me too seriously about that. But you're a smart guy. But it was quite clear that Lawrence had greatest intentions. But he said this to me. His brother David Rockefeller. And Jay Rockefeller, who had been chairman of Senate Intelligence, Senator Rockefeller from West Virginia, they were jumping up on his. I'll tell you what he told me.
As you know, I'm always on the hunt for things that help me stay sharp, focused, and full of energy while I'm diving into life's mysteries and making this show happen. And I've got to say, Mudwater has completely transformed my mornings. Back in the day, I used to struggle with that post-coffee crash. And let's not even get into the caffeine jitters. Mudwater gave me the smooth, steady energy I was missing. It's packed with functional mushrooms like lion's mane, chaga, and reishi, plus turmeric and cacao, all working together to keep me focused, calm, and grounded. Honestly, it's like coffee went on a yoga retreat and came back zen. What I love most is that it's not just about replacing coffee, it's a whole new ritual. It's a simple, nourishing way to start the day, and I actually look forward to it every morning. Every ingredient is USDA certified organic, vegan, non-GMO, and there's 0 sugar. It's energy that doesn't mess with your sleep or make you question your life choices at 3 a.m. Ready to make the switch to cleaner energy? Head to mudwater.com, that's MUDWTR.com, and grab your starter kit today. Right now, our listeners get an exclusive deal up to 43% off your entire order, plus free shipping and a free rechargeable frother when you use code Jesse. That's right, up to 43% off with code Jesse at MUDWTR.com. After your purchase, they'll ask you how you found them. Please show your support and let them know we sent you. Keep your energy natural and refreshing all year long with Mudwater, because life's too short for anything less than clean, delicious energy.
Late one night, we go out on the deck of the ranch,
Yeah.
the JY Ranch.
Yeah.
In the Rockefeller Ranch in the Tetons. Because the Rockefellers owned the Tetons, the whole range, and gave it to the U.S. government. And then they kept out this beautiful ranch. And that's where the Clintons would go in the summer for vacation to learn about this. But the ranch had this beautiful cabin on it, lodge. And we were late one night out on the deck, and he said, I asked him, I said, look, now this is September of 93. And remember, I'm very new to this, but I got pulled in very quickly after the intelligence community realized that we could make contact. But there were people who were friendly to this. So you have the white hats and the black hats, let's say, that there were people who wanted this to get fixed and people who never wanted this to come out, right? So the ones who don't are implacable enemies. The ones that do try to help, whether they're doing it overtly or covertly.
And Lawrence was trying to help?
He was trying to help, but his nephew, the Senator, Jay Rockefeller, and his brother, Chase Manhattan, chairman of Chase Manhattan.
David Rockefeller?
Yeah, which became, David.
Yeah.
They didn't want, he said, they are already jumping up and down on my nuts. That's what he said. For even having this meeting with you.
Yeah.
So I said, no, because I'd asked him, I said, we need help.
Yeah.
And you can help us.
So you feel like he got kind of stymied by his family?
family, and later by people on his team that betrayed him.
Because he was funding John Mack as well, right?
Yes, that was part of the betrayal.
And I think
Because he was moved his funds over into people who meant well, like John Mack. I knew John Mack pretty well, but
did you like John Mack? Did you find him to be an honest actor?
He was doing the best he could with what he knew.
Yeah.
So, but
He's kind of a hero of mine. I think he's great.
But if you're working with only 2 cards out of a 52 card deck,
Yeah.
so he had 2 cards out of the 52 cards.
For the audience, John Mack, head of the Harvard Psychiatry Department.
Yeah, did all the work with the abductions and stuff.
Exactly. Childhood friend of Bud Hopkins, who got into all these, just started regressing people and.
But what they
giving them
didn't
all
know, every one of those cases that were being funneled to him, were all done by humans. None of them were extraterrestrial.
I want to get into this with you because you've said, so one of the most famous cases, abduction cases in U.S. history that I think the Obama's production team is now making a show on for Netflix or a movie on, is the Betty and Barney Hill case of 1961.
Yep.
And you say that was perpetrated by humans and not aliens.
Well, it very likely was, but only because the mechanism how it happened would not be consistent with interstellar transdimensional technologies. We also know that by that date, I think when it's 61 or something like that, we already had fully operational man-made electrogravitic craft with people who were made to look like aliens and what's called stagecraft doing this. Now, John Mack didn't know that, Bud Hopkins didn't know that.
You think we could do that
Whitley
in 61?
We absolutely could have.
Really?
So what I'm saying is, here's what I'm trying to say. I want to be very clear on this. I'm not saying no one's had contact with ETs. I did. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had that contact. Jake had that consciousness contact with the egg he picked up. Profound. And I did too in 73. And it was beautiful. And these civilizations are completely, not only are they benign, they be closer to an angel than a demon. But
that's what some of your critics say, is you summon stuff and it can be not always good,
Oh, well, I mean, those are the religious nuts that are like, end of the world eschatology fanatics.
But there have to be some bad, just like us, right? Aren't there
Oh, yeah.
some
I'm sure
bad
there
ones?
are, but they're not allowed out of their solar system.
You
It's
think
like,
so?
oh, I know that.
So you think that's like
I
this-
know what the protocols are for, let's say, real space command, not the U.S. space command.
Do you believe in anything demonic in that world, in the world of the ET thing?
Well, see, now you just mixed up 2 of the 3 categories that I elucidated. There are extraterrestrial vehicles, or NHI craft. There are man-made lookalikes and facsimiles. And there are things from other dimensions that are really nasty,
Okay.
that are not extraterrestrial.
And you're saying if you...
But they're being deliberately conflated by people like Jim Semivan and Elizondo and others to gaslight people in Congress.
But wouldn't Jacques Vallée have said that too? Wouldn't he sort
No,
of say...
because in the 80s he got taken in by that organization.
You think Jacques Vallée is co-opted by...
He absolutely did get it.
Really?
100%. We know who did it, how they did it, what he got.
Can you say anything more?
No, I won't. I'm just saying we are not going to tolerate people who spread, knowingly or unknowingly, disinformation that could lead to an interplanetary war and the termination of life on Earth.
Well, that'd be a bummer.
That's what that agenda is. Don't be naive. How do you get the minds and hearts of people to unite against some totalitarian global threat unless they've been brainwashed for decades with abductions and mutilations and false images and Hollywood movies? That's what that is. It's a CIA psychological warfare operation.
I don't get that vibe from Jacques Vallée, though. I think he's a little deeper as far as...
He's much deeper now.
Yeah.
No, he's completely come out of that.
Okay.
But back in the day, like astronaut Edgar Mitchell invited me to brief the Board of Noetic Sciences back years ago.
Cool. Yeah.
And Jacques Vallée and I were there for this weekend, this retreat. Eventually, Claiborne Pell, Senator Pell, came.
That's really interesting. Claiborne Pell is, senator who was Biden's closest mentor.
And he was part, and Claiborne Pell, I found out later after he died, was part of this cabal.
Well, he was interested in all this stuff.
Yes, but he was also carrying water for that organization.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
And this
now, look, I mean, this has been a 35-year
When you
thing.
say that organization, is that Magic or
Yes,
what was
this
there,
covert
MJ12
transnational
or
thing that
transnational
we
thing?
gave you the graphic for. You guys can show to the public.
Well, it is interesting what was rumored. So the MJ12 documents came out from 84. It was a string of documents, 84
Yeah.
into the 90s.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And in the Majestic 12 was a guy named Detlev Bronk. And Detlev Bronk was, I believe, president of the Rockefeller Foundation for a little bit.
Yes.
So
Look, all the big industrialists. So first of all, let's ratchet this back a little bit.
yeah, sure.
What the definition of fascism is. Nowadays, if someone disagrees with you, you're a fascist. Everyone's a Nazi, everyone's a fascist.
Right.
Let's put that aside. The actual definition of fascism is very powerful industrial corporate interest taking over and overly influencing the government of we the people and corrupting it or moving it in the direction so that the government is serving the interests of those large oligarch corporate interests. So in the industrial revolution and era, it would have been that crowd, JP, Morgan, Rockefeller. Now it's the big tech companies and others. We know how it works. I have a guy who is with NSA who was in meetings with some of the senior C-suite people at a major tech and telecommunications company, sort of colluding.
Well, we know from Snowden.
Completely illegal stuff, right?
We know from Snowden they had backdoors, they had Bull Run and Prism, and I don't think this was done unbeknownst to Google and Apple, and so we know
it was with their cooperation.
Yeah.
All right. But it reaches a point where it also becomes collusion between the element within what is being called the deep state, which is a misnomer in a way. But let's just call it that. And these corporate interests. Because they have an interest in not letting the public know the truth, because the truth leads inexorably to the release of the tech that's going to terminate oil, gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, hydroelectric, all of it.
What do you think of Bob Lazar? So Bob Lazar, obviously famous, UFO whistleblower, claimed to be at S4, a special compartment of Area 51, in 1987. Some files get put on George Knapp's desk from this CIA cargo pilot named John Lear saying, here's this guy, Bob Lazar, and he's been reverse engineering craft, and the craft looks like Billy Meyer's sports model. It's this UFO. Do you think Bob Lazar is legit and actually worked at Area 51 on reverse engineering
I have
craft?
had no one corroborate that. So if you follow what I do, if I have information on the UFO's interest in our nuclear programs, I'll have a dozen guys who don't know each other, who have not colluded or synced up their stories to confirm that. I've not had anyone confirm his presence there at that time and what he actually saw.
Yeah.
Now, I think he probably saw something. He was there a short time. So what he might have been provided was part information and part disinformation, and a controlled leak happened.
I think
to gaslight. Okay, so let me explain how very sophisticated counterintelligence works. Again, you have information, that's the sweet candy on the outside, but then, quite unwittingly, I think he could have been given some false information because things were beginning to come out, and they wanted to gaslight people off the path.
He admits that. He says maybe because he was forced to drink a liquid, and then he was given information that looked like the same information Rick Doty gave Linda Moulton Howe and Paul Benowitz in '79.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you think that's what's so tough about this topic is there's always disinfo riddled in the info, and then you.
But that's been my job. Is to pull that together. I call it the disclosure matrix, or the disclosure mosaic, actually. The mosaic is, like, you want to create an accurate picture, and you have to get 1,000 billion pieces.
It's just so
hard. And put it together.
It's so hard to talk about, because even, like, bringing up the Majestic 12, that's, like, seen as a joke. But then you could say, oh, maybe James Jesus Angleton, who's running counterintel for the program for decades, actually kind of pushed this. And there were elements of falsifiable things sprinkled in to some truths.
There are.
That's what I think.
We know that.
Yeah, I know. But like, and then you say it, but it has this like jokey connotation. MJ12, like, come on, MJ12. You know, it's a great tactic.
But look, that whole operation. Everyone says military intelligence is an oxymoron. It isn't. I mean, there are some incredibly brilliant people, particularly in these psyops, dealing with this.
What's your process?
And they're very, very slick. And they're very good.
How do you know? So like somebody, you know, like Randy Anderson, who I've interviewed, who, you know, said he was taken down to an underground facility. At Crane, Indiana, and he again came to you first. And so I want to, you should be given a lot of credit for all these whistleblowers who are coming out. Or Jake Barber, who said he was red teaming you initially. He came to kind of infiltrate your camp. How do you verify that somebody is, you know, actually has your best interest at heart and is being truthful to you? Because for me, I'm just being very real. Often it's like, I think I've gotten certain things wrong. And I think I just try to, you know, suss out people's energy. But then also obviously look for as much cross corroboration that isn't correlated with the source. But like, I have to have, you know, a certain percentage of humility where it's like, I've probably gotten things wrong before. And so
absolutely.
You feel the same way? Or do you,
look, the 1997 briefings we did for Congress off-site at the Westin Hotel, we had somebody made it very far into that process who, and thank God, my military advisor and I think it was Edgar Mitchell, and one of my other whistleblowers were at the bar with this guy late one night, the night before we had the meeting for Congress. And the day before, we had a gathering so all these whistleblowers could get to know each other, create an esprit de corps, you know, kind of make them feel safe because they're all doing it together because it's scary. And this guy that we thought was legit started prattling on with some absolutely provable false information. And some of his information was true, but he was going to fold in and embellish it into things that were false. And I got a knock on the door at 3 a.m. and said, this guy is putting in stuff that we absolutely know is false. I said, ask him to go home. So I pulled him out of the meeting. So the guy hates my guts, right? Because this is going to be his thing to stand up from. I mean, Dan Burton, who was chairman of Oversight Committee for the House, who issued 1,000 subpoenas for Bill Clinton, right? During the Monica Lewinsky and all that nonsense. So I said, no, he's out. So look, yes, of course. I mean, I'm one man, and I have mostly a volunteer team, the high place, the well-placed people. But yeah, I mean, I've been gaslit and deceived and betrayed, and ultimately it's like what is in ye shall know them by their deeds. But what do they do? Eventually, someone's going to show their ass, right? And then they're out, you know. And for me, I know it sounds rough. You get one bite at that apple, because what we're dealing with at the level of say a president or Congress or the public information is that this is too important a matter to allow someone who's in there sort of telling half-truths. And this is why I will immediately separate with someone who commingles known false information with information. Now, if they do it unwittingly, it's okay as long as they correct it. If they're doing it deliberately, like Luis Elizondo, it's a bridge too far. Now, I'll forgive anything if someone comes clean. Right.
What's the daylight between you and Lou Elizondo as far as the substance you were? Because I mean, I think you're putting out more.
You keep interrupting me, but I will tell you if you'll let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
Number one, he tells people and has told people consistently, we don't know what these are. Now he's changed that a little because he has to. Then he said they're a threat to the national security. The implication being the NHI, non-human, are a threat. Which, if that's the case, then we're going to go to World War III in a Star Wars fiasco. And it's a complete false narrative.
He's kind of walked that back, though.
Well, he has to, because we're done with that. And then he would also say, we don't have anything that flies like that. So like when David Fravor and I first spoke, who was the F-18 Hornet pilot, and it was a serendipitous meeting because there's a band called Godsmack that's a heavy metal band, and the lead guy, Sully Arnott, is a friend of mine. And it turned out he lived across the road from David Fravor. because his daughter had backed into his mailbox and broke it, and he went, "Oh, it's David Fravor." Really funny. The universe works in strange ways.
That is a crazy
And
synchronicity.
so Sully Arna calls me up, says, "This Godsmack lead singer guy," and I go, "Well, really? He's your neighbor? Well, get him on the horn. Let's talk."
Yes.
This is some years ago, and David goes, "Oh yeah, that was, it had to be alien." I said, "Sir, with all due respect, that was how the Lockheed skunk works."
Really? That made the craft.
Yeah, that was one of ours.
And
he is now.
So because Fravor wouldn't say that now.
Oh, he did say so recently.
But in front of Congress, he says.
He's been told since then. He's corrected. So I said, no, that came out of the Lockheed Skunk Works. It's one of ours. It was something that they did on purpose to see this global organization, to see how our military would react.
So you think that Tic Tac was Lockheed
absolutely.
Skunk Works? Wow.
In the book we're going to give you, there's a very good account of it from 1967 over Pennsylvania. And we have a whistleblower who saw it being offloaded out of a big ship out of the in 1991, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's ours.
That was in.
And then later, very recently, a Lockheed executive admitted to David Fravor that was theirs.
Really?
But I knew from the first time I saw it. I said it was all over CNN. I go, that's not extraterrestrial. It's one of ours.
But David Fravor feels pretty no nonsense to me. Do you think he's
knowingly
lying?
He is a totally straight up guy.
Yeah.
But let me unpack this a little bit, if you'll let me, and just stay with me for a minute. If you're a pilot flying jets, which are circa 30s, 40s, 50s, or a guy doing stuff with rockets like Mr. Musk, which is circa 1940s, right? The V2, that's Werner von Braun. So a rocket, they're fancier now and better computers. The technology is very old. It's a Roman candle, a Chinese candle, going up and blowing up periodically. So this is primitive junk. I mean, it's all junk. So it is compared to what we have out in these covert programs. So you have no foundation to have been read in. If you're an F-18 pilot, why would you be read into something the President of the United States isn't read into?
But why wouldn't?
And so the same is true if you're working for an aerospace company, but you're working on the conventional end of it. So they're saying the truth as they know it. And here's the danger. I want to get to this, a big key point. If you don't know, there are three major things going on: ET, man-made, and this weird stranger thing, sort of extra-dimensional spooky stuff, and that they're deliberately being commingled to obfuscate, hide the truth. You're going to get it wrong. So that is the core of how the psychological warfare operations work. Because most people, and this is from whether you're the president or the King of England, you're not going to know enough unless you've done a huge deep dive into this, which has been my task to try to unravel this mess. Because when I started out, I thought everything that went bump in the night was alien. I did. 90, early on. And it wasn't until I started having people come forward who said, oh, we piloted these. And then I had guys come forward who had actually been on the abduction squads, made to look like aliens.
Whoa.
And they said, oh,
you
no.
met people who've
committed those crimes.
Wow.
Yeah, and they feel terrible later in life. So if they were very young, they were young guys doing it. Now they're like 70, 80 years old. They feel terrible about what they did, and they regret it. But they said, if we talk about this publicly, they will absolutely kill us. Because that's the heart of the secrecy. It's the mind control stuff, the sort of psychological word. They want everyone to believe there's a threat from out there. Because the card they want to play, that Werner von Braun warned about on his deathbed to my friend Carol Rosin, was they want to create an alien threat to unite the world in this sort of dystopian, not a golden age, but a dark age of militaristic totalitarianism. So if Lou and his guys move in that direction, I got to call it out. And people say, well, you're not very friendly. I said, no. I said, we got to protect the human future. I mean, where are we going to end up?
Yeah.
Now, where's the end of this algorithm going? You run this algorithm like they're doing it. Oh, we don't have any craft like that, because they don't want the National Military Command structure to know that something they encounter, like Mr. Fravor did, was ours. And therefore, they'll say, oh, it's alien. Oh, therefore, we're going to engage in this war. This is how you start wars. This is how you get in disasters, like after 9/11, when we went into Iraq, and Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with that, and he didn't have the weapons of mass destruction. This is how you connect the next big war. This is what happened with COVID. They took a dangerous virus, it got loose, and then they shut the world down, even though the World Health Organization admits now that was a big public health mistake. So the problem becomes this being mishandled by this president and Congress, because this is all going to come out in the next year or two, will be 1,000 times worse than with the mishandling of COVID or 9/11. So we're out of time to get the information out in a truthful way, but a truth that can lead to a future that is a golden era of peace, prosperity, a pristine planet that gets fixed, the end of poverty, and peace here and in space. You cannot have peace on Earth and engage in war in space.
I would hope.
Right?
Agreed. Well, I would.
But that's stop.
Yeah.
But the people that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the inescapable conclusion of what they're saying opens the pathway to that. Protecting the human future and consciousness of what kind of world we're going to have, that's actually my central mission. It's not the Disclosure Project.
I would hope that if David Fravor got told by a Lockheed exec, hey, this is one of ours, he would come clean about that.
Well, my assistant can look it up. I think it did come out somewhere.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But that makes me disappointed in Fravor if that happened, because I would love for him to
he's a
update
great
his view.
No, wait. See, that's wrong.
Okay.
Don't be impetuous.
I'm trying not to be.
Don't be impetuous. You have people who speak the truth as they know it, right? But they're only given...
So he didn't trust the Lockheed executive? He's hearing other sources telling him other things?
No, I'm saying before that, his comments, what he said.
But I would hope
before.
that he'd then correct the record. He'd then say...
I think he probably has by now.
Oh, interesting.
But
okay.
I think he has. I mean, he's a stand-up guy.
Seems like it to me.
Yeah, and the problem is many of these people who are great guys get intercepted by people who are slick counterintelligence operatives.
Anybody else you think is a bad actor?
Look, it doesn't matter. Here's what. Here it is. For your audience, keep it simple. If they're denying that we have these objects, they're either uninformed or they're disinforming you deliberately. If they say there's a threat from these objects from outer that are not ours, now the ones that are man-made, huge threat to national security because they're not under the control of the U.S. military, legal military, or White House or Congress. Very dangerous. If they say that the aliens are here for some malevolent purpose, there may be things from other dimensions that are quite malevolent, and those deliberately get mixed in with the aliens. But no, they're not. Because if they were, it's like what Congressman Burchett said, we'd be a charcoal briquette floating through space. Because visualize for a moment. Take what Jake said about, because he's been on your show, I'll reference him. So he's been a site where we've targeted these ET craft and downed them. Now, I know I've been at multiple sites where this is going on, and I know where they are around the world. They're in the briefing document I gave you. There's a map. Now, they have electromagnetic pulse weapons. So an electromagnetic pulse is like when you explode an atomic bomb, right? And there's that pulse that goes out that can knock out your whole electric grid.
The nuke without the nuke.
But we have taken the nuke without the nuke, but embedded within that is something called a scalar signal. Scalar, Tesla described it, it's basically instead of electromagnetic is a waveform like this, right? And coherent light is a laser. We sync up the wavelength instead of it being, waves like this, like on an oscilloscope. A scalar is a point that goes out longitudinally, faster than the speed of light. So there is a scalar part within the EMP signal that is very disruptive to interstellar communications and travel. This is why, after we detonated the first atomic bomb, the ETs came in en force, in mass, because it not only signaled that we were in trouble, that we could go to a point where we could destroy all life on Earth, but it disrupted their systems.
Do you think Reagan's Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative, had anything to do with UFO crash retrievals?
Oh, sure. It was just a front. It was a black budget front. So the whole Star Wars thing and Brilliant Pebbles was just an expensive boondoggle. Most of the money for that went into these black projects.
Wow.
The illegal black projects. We'll get into that in a minute. But what I'm saying here is that these technologies have been operational since the late 40s. So don't see, everyone's fighting the last war. We figured out, Tesla, T. Townsend Brown, 20s, 30s, 40s. Tesla was killed in 43, right? But so there were massive breakthroughs in electromagnetism and things that are to this day still covert. Those began to be weaponized, and they realized, hey, there are these craft that aren't from here. Let's see if we can knock some down.
Yeah.
And reverse engineer them. The problem is doing so is an act of war because we're targeting them. Now, civilizations that are 10 to the 6th to 10 to the 8th years more advanced than we are, 100,000 to 10 million years more advanced. If they were hostile, we would have been done. August 1945, over, folks. Hey, kids, you're done, right? They're not. I know this from having had contact, and everyone I know who's been on a crash retrieval team, like Jake, who's had a close encounter with the consciousness of those beings, they're not.
Well, the bad ones might not want to destroy us. They might want to enslave us or mine us.
You're so brainwashed.
I'm just saying. I'm just hypothesizing. I don't know.
You look at too much nonsense, man. Look, none of that could be done with the flick of a switch if they wanted to turn this planet into a automaton planet or whatever.
What do you think?
The technologies are so advanced.
This book is amazing, by the way, and I do recommend everybody read it and buy it because it's a treasure trove of excellent documentation across decades. One guy in this book is a really interesting fellow named Bob Beckwith. And Bob Beckwith wrote about levitation, teleportation, and time travel. And he also claimed to be involved with the Philadelphia experiment in 1942.
I knew him.
So you knew Bob Beckwith?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And my military advisor was on his board of directors for his company.
So because you hear, so the Philadelphia experiment, for the audience, is, that you have this ship, this naval ship stationed, I believe, at Philadelphia.
Happened in Rhode Island. That was the cover story. That's a long story. Yeah.
Well, let's hear it. Here's what's really interesting, that this you might not know about, because this is, as of this last month, there's a guy named Harold Malmgren, and he's a presidential advisor for JFK, LBJ, Nixon, and Ford. And he has come out, he's been tweeting a bunch about things that he learned in that capacity, and getting briefed by Richard Bissell, who is the deputy director of the CIA, who basically founded Area 51 on quote-unquote other world technologies.
Yes.
He said that a contact of his, a high-level intel contact of his from abroad, talked to him about classified work that Tesla and Townsend Brown did on submarines together.
Yes.
You have uncovered collaboration between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Townsend Brown.
Yeah, but I said to you informally, I did not get that from any U.S. source.
What source did you get it from?
Foreign intelligence.
Do you think it is a good source? Do you think it's real?
No reason why would somebody tell me that.
And so I wonder, because I always thought the Philadelphia experiment was kind of quacky, even though I've gone very deep on Townsend Brown. I think there's a lot to Townsend Brown stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so
brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, an amazing figure. And also, for the people that say, oh, it's all electrogravitics and it's not, and there's no ET component or there's no UFO component, he had a UFO interaction that inspired the rest of his work at the age of 17.
And so did Tesla and his mentor, Dr. Walter Russell.
There you go.
The Swannanoa Institute. My house in Virginia is 10 minutes from Swannanoa.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
weird coincidence. I didn't know that when I bought it. It's
And
a
now,
farm.
now you have Terrence Howard carrying the mantle of Walter Russell.
Yeah.
So do you think anything happened in the Philadelphia experiment? And what was your interaction with Bob Beckwith like? Do we have time travel?
I mean, he knew the stuff I already knew. What I didn't know is what I wanted him to share with me. So he had invented something called a neutrino light detector. And now let me explain what that is. A neutrino, you can Google what neutrino is, but these subatomic particles and whatnot. But what he had invented was a detector that would pick up neutrino light, a burst of neutrino. He got a national security order from the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, that runs all the super secret spy satellites, so they could seize that technology to put it on the sats. Because what that's used for is when a non-human craft moves out of, let's call it, trans-dimensional space-time into 3D, there's a burst of this neutrino light. That enables them to pick that up, triangulate it, and strike the craft to down it.
Wow.
So it's a part of a weapon detection system. And so this genius, Beckwith, but he never got to utilize it because it got seized. Now we have a witness who came forward, Eric Hecker, a couple years ago, who worked for Raytheon, and they were put in a neutrino light system a mile under the ice at the South Pole. True. And so one of the prime bad actors in all this is Raytheon. And, along with Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Skunk Works, and others.
And he said that
EG&G.
caused the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand. Hecker did.
When they flipped it on the first time, because who knows if they got the frequencies right. So it's both an active and passive system. It can pick up these objects when they, let's say, step down out of trans-dimensional space-time into 3D, but they can also be an active weapon system, a carrier for hitting them at very, very powerful pulses. So this is the other problem. If you're in the national military command structure and you're not read in to the technologies that this clandestine criminal organization has, you're behind the curve very badly. And my coming of age on that was first with the director of the CIA for Clinton. Then in 1997, and many other people, but in 97 I briefed the J2, the head of intelligence joint staff, Admiral Wilson. And you may know about that. A memo leaked out from Eric Davis. And
I know a lot about it.
Well, I was the briefer.
Yeah.
So I was in charge of the stand-up briefing.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be 45 minutes, went on for 2 or 3 hours, and the Admiral kept canceling meetings. But prior to the meeting, my military advisor, who knew him, he had been a senior naval intelligence guy, good guy, wonderful guy, got a briefing document to the Admiral and materials prior to our meeting. And based on that, Admiral Wilson was able to run to ground and find some offices where these operations were going on. He knew nothing about it. And he was the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, meaning you're putting the equivalent of the Presidential Daily Briefing, intelligence brief, together like the Director of CIA does for the President, or DNI does, but for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had no knowledge of this subject. And when he began to hit pay dirt, he got threatened. He was threatened with being demoted and taking a star off his lapel, which means a huge pay cut in retirement. And by the time I got to the meeting, he was a combination of furious and scared. All right? So, which I've seen this 1,000 times. I call it disclosure PTSD, which we all have. Right? It's serious stuff. I mean, if you have that level of responsibility, you find out this is going on, a whole universe of this, and you're in charge of the security of the United States.
Yeah.
And most of the free world.
Speaking of
scary, right? So
extremely.
So the meeting went on for a long time, but one of the existential things at the end of it was I said, well, we really need your help. Now this is 28 years ago in April. It's 97. We really need your help fixing this problem. He says, well, I don't have access. I've been denied access. And they flat out said, you don't have a need to know. To which he said, I think, paraphrasing, if I don't, who does? I'm the head of intelligence joint staff.
Head of J2.
It blew him off. So the problem became, I said, look, He said, who else have you briefed who not being allowed to know or control this? I said, I didn't meet with Clinton personally, but the president, the CIA director, and the Secretary of Defense Cohen, and a bunch of other people. And he went, oh my God. I said, yes, now you know how big the problem is. It's an existential constitutional crisis. Much bigger crisis for the United States and China, Russia, Iran, the Middle East. No one's doing anything about it. It's dangerous that no one's doing anything about it. If anyone's listening with the administration, this should be on your front burner, not on the back burner.
Speaking of the administration, bizarre connection between Donald Trump, the sitting president, and the Philadelphia experiment is
his uncle.
Exactly. There's not a lot of archival footage of John Trump, who was the basically country's lead in radar at the time.
Oh, he was
at
a genius,
MIT.
brilliant guy.
Genius.
Yeah, MIT.
And was tasked with going into the FBI vault that had confiscated all of Tesla's files and looking at whether any of that would be of service to national security.
Yep.
And so do you think Donald Trump, due to that, might have some special knowledge on this matter?
I don't think his uncle would have ever shared that with his. It's like my uncle, who was with Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
You know, the things he told me about were the things, I've been working on the thing that landed on the moon. In 69, when in the late 50s, we had things that could go to the moon and back without a rocket, right? But if he knew about it, I don't think he would have even told me about that. Because everyone knows that lethal force is used. Northrop Grumman have wet works people who kill people. So does Lockheed, so does Raytheon. So, I mean, these are thugs. And, you know, Grush's guys, the guys who kind of sent him out to look into this, 3 years ago when I got pulled into the skiff at the Senate Intelligence Committee, first thing I said is that you're dealing with thugs here. Think of the mafia on super steroids. It's the largest criminal, corrupt organization in the history, known history of the earth, period. And they have the technology and the means to make your life a living hell, which mine has been since 1992. But I said, just be prepared, because I believe in informed consent as a doctor, right? So I said, you have no idea what you're walking into here. And boy, within a day or two of that meeting, the main investigator for Senate Intelligence had 2 Blackhawks over his house, unmarked, and he had access to all flight plans, no flight plans, over his house, shaking the house with his 4 children in it, with this guy looking out with the death stare, like you're a dead man staring at him. So it's a very dangerous business. Not if you're talking nonsense. If you're spreading false information, half information, disinformation, no one's going to care. But if you're actually getting to the truth, like that man was for Senate Intelligence, because he was assigned to the co-chair and chair of Senate Intelligence to get to the bottom of this, Rubio, who's now Secretary of State. Yeah. I tell people, they're going to throw what they can at you to intimidate you, right? So, you know, this is, I mean, for a lot of people, it's a freaking hobby. But when you get cut through all that, it's deadly serious stuff. But, you know, most people, they're not going to make it that far. Because what's going to happen, they're going to start on this path, and very quickly they're going to be intercepted by really professionally well-trained counterintelligence people, and they're going to go off the mark.
I believe to this day.
That's Elizondo's job. That's Chris Mellon's job. That's, you know, frankly, Hal Puthoff's job on energy. That's their job, is to divert people into that dead-end cul-de-sac.
I believe that would be sad about Hal, because I love Hal, so I hope that's not the case. But
I know for a fact that, I mean, he has to do what he's doing.
Okay.
One of his closest friends is on my team. I know exactly what they said and what they did to get him to do what he's been doing.
The only, you know, so this is interesting. I came up with
I'm sorry. I mean,
no, it's okay.
I'm at the point that I don't think people, here's what I think.
Yeah.
I said this to your producer or friend before we came in here. The folks who know about this, they need to come clean truthfully soon, because there is moving through the system the ability for a law enforcement entity I can't name that I'm providing intel to go to these folks, get their information, interrogate them, and God forbid they lie, they're going to prison the rest of their life. This is getting very serious right now, so people need to either be quiet and not lie, or speak the truth.
Yeah.
And this is, I am making an explicit advisory here.
Well, I love that message. And I made this deep dive on Thomas Townsend Brown. I think he's this amazing figure who deserves to be vindicated. And right before I did it, Eric Davis got in touch with me and was like, Townsend Brown is a phony. And I had known enough at that point.
He's counterintelligence.
I don't know.
We know that.
But you know that?
Oh, I've known that since the early 2000s, 90. I mean, yes.
Oh man, such a bummer because all these guys are, there's so much brain power, and so it's a.
Yes, but think about it. You're going to put really good people out there to carry the water, to mismessage, misdirect, what have you. Look, I can put myself in anyone's shoes. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of sort of the ruling Politburo of this covert group. You're going to send people out who are very well trained. Some of them go through something called the farm, where they're professionally trained to lie, pass lie detectors, They're very well trained at social engineering. I'm your best friend, trust me, wink, wink, and then gaslight you, to misdirect you. So none of that surprises me. It's what you would expect if you took seriously what Wilbur Smith said in the 1950 document. It's in the briefing document that was top secret from the Canadian government that I think accidentally got declassified. And he said, about us reverse engineering the ET craft. But one of his conclusions was, he said, no, not a conclusion. He was told directly that this issue was more secret than the development of the hydrogen bomb.
2 levels higher.
And that was in 1950, 2 years before we had it. And that is how seriously the secrecy is. Because they were trying to figure out the modus operandi of the ET craft, which means how they operate.
That is
and
remarkable.
They had not done that yet. See, it was 54 is when they had the breakthrough. This is 50. So 52. If you're trying to keep something like this secret, you're going to deploy every asset you can, up to and including the President of the United States, right? Never mind putting out to, no offense, people new to the subject who have no intel background, where you can gaslight people over and over again. And that's true whether it's you, Joe Rogan, ABC News, 60 Minutes, whoever it is. So that is the Achilles heel of disclosure, is that for every great person who comes forward trying to tell the truth, there are 10 people who are going to say part truth, part fiction. And so I'm just saying that I'm becoming less and less patient with that. I used to be a lot more diplomatic than I am now. I guess, I'm getting old and crotchety. Well, I'm just out of surgery too, so.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Well,
I mean, I have a little bit. Some pain. I don't take any opioids or narcotics.
I'm amazed. Well,
I wouldn't let them give me even going into surgery. I said, no, give me some Toradol, non-steroidal, and.
It's incredible. Well, to this day, RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
He's great.
He's amazing, and he's in the current administration.
Yes, yeah.
As FDA or Health and Human Services, right?
HHS.
Or HHS, yeah. He says that his father was not killed by Sirhan, but by this guy Eugene Thanes Caesar, who I believe was a skunkworks security guard or something.
Look, I have a letter. It may be in the book. It's in our archive.
Yeah.
And it was his dad writing to a UFO researcher back in '68. It's dated 1 month before they killed him. And it opens saying, I'm a card, excuse me. It says, I'm a card-carrying member of the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Association of America. There was such a thing. I went, oh my God, it's so iconoclastic, an anachronism. And I go, wow, and I get this letter. And so years ago, I ran into RFK Jr. at Sundance, and 50 Cent I was giving a talk, and RFK Jr. had done a documentary about mountaintop removal mining, coal mining in West Virginia, what an environmental disaster. And called The Last Mountain. I think it was called The Last Mountain. It was great. And I told him just briefly, because we were in this crowd, I have a letter from your dad about this UFO issue dated a month before they killed him. And that's why, because if he was going to get the nomination and he would have won. But his dad was super interested in this, and also I'm convinced knew that his brother, Jack Kennedy, the president, was killed over this.
You think he was killed over UFOs specifically?
Oh, yes.
So the data points that I have around that are, I believe, I don't know if this letter is real. Maybe you would know if this letter is real. There's a letter dated November 12th, 1963, 10 days before he died, to John McCone. John McCone is the acting CIA director because he had just fired Dulles.
Right.
And McCone also was the former head of the Atomic Energy Commission, so he would probably know a thing or two about the UFO issue.
Oh, he would have. Yeah.
And JFK is saying to John McCone, we need to coordinate better with the Soviets on this issue of quote unquote unknowns in Soviet airspace, so they don't mistake these unknowns as acts of American aggression. Exactly.
Yeah, could trigger World War III.
So do you think that letter is real?
I don't know the provenance of it. I think it likely is. It comports with the facts. But here's the other thing. We have a man whose interview we have on audio tape named Bill Holden, who was the chief steward for Air Force One when Kennedy was flying over to Berlin, where he gave the famous I am a Berliner speech. And I debriefed this man. And on that flight, there were some papers, and on one of the papers, there had been a big UFO sighting. That was on, so he brought this up to the president, Kennedy. And Kennedy said, and the man broke into tears when he said this. Kennedy turned to him and says, I know this is true, and I know these are real, but the whole matter is out of my hands, and I don't know why. He admitted he had no control over the issue, which is why he fired Dulles. Because Eisenhower had lost control in the late 50s. That extended into the Kennedy era. And really no president, except people who have been part of that organization, like George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney, by extension W, have really had any control over it or any detailed knowledge of it. The current president has virtually no knowledge.
It's fascinating.
So President Clinton, a friend of his, Webster Hubbell, who was in the Department of Justice, wrote a book. Forget the name of the book. And in it, he admits that he and the president were trying to get to the bottom of a couple things. One of them was who killed Jack Kennedy and why, and what's going on with UFOs. Of course, they're related. And then something about Marilyn Monroe. And of course, I have a CIA document that's top secret, not been declassified, that describes James Jesus Angleton signed it.
Wow.
That's it's in the briefing document. It's a wiretap of Marilyn Monroe in 1962, a couple days before they killed her, threatening to hold a press conference.
And that's a real document.
Oh, it is.
That's insane.
Yeah. Oh, it's real. I know the guy who took it out of the vault from NSA. He's an NSA guy. But I got folks who... Now, people say, why aren't you arrested? I said, because once we briefed all these people, like at the level of the president and Senate oversight committees, and we concluded that these programs were being run illegally outside the Constitution, we declared them all illegal. Therefore, anyone listening, if you're in those operations or have been, they cannot prosecute you for going around your non-disclosure agreements. If you bring out documents, tapes, material, they're open source, and I will release them. Because all that material, and I've told Jake this, have been accumulated under an illegal operation abusing the National Security Act and national security provisions when they are in fact have no protections. So we need to flip the table here. Instead of these whistleblowers being prosecuted or people being killed for trying to get the truth out, we flip it around. We're U.S. law enforcement operating legally under the Constitution, go after the bad actors, right? So this is where it's going to have to go. And I think it needs to be non-kinetic, not violent, but it needs to be done by any means necessary. But if this is the foundation, I want to unpack this a little bit. The foundation of Disclosure Project, so not in this book, but in our archive, is what's called a UNOD, unless otherwise directed. It's a military technique used that you write to a senior person. And it says, unless otherwise directed, this is my assessment, and this is what I'm going to do. They don't have to write back, because then there's plausible deniability to a SINC, a commander in chief, or a 4-star or something. And it's used. And so my military advisor said, you know what we need to do? This is by late 97. And after the debacle with Admiral Wilson and finding out, we had one data point after another that this was an illegal, unsanctioned, rogue criminal organization. At that point I said, well, we need to declare it as such. And therefore we need to vitiate everyone's non-disclosure agreements so that they can come forward. That's what we did. So that is 1997. I put I think a 2 or 3 month clock on it. So I said, unless we're notified otherwise, our assessment is that these programs are illegal, corrupt, and unconstitutional, based on the following facts. The president has been denied access, the CI director was denied access, the head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and other senior flag officers have been denied access, senior members of the Senate and House oversight, relevant committees have been denied access. Because by then I had met with all that personally. This is not internet, Google crap, conspiracy theory stuff. So at that point, of course, it flipped my whole world upside down as a doctor. But I said, no, at this point, we're declaring these illegal. And so if you're someone at Lockheed, Northrop, Raytheon, CIA, DOD, NSA, the whole alphabet soup, FBI, and you know about this, you want to come forward, they can't touch you. Now, the good news is now there's a law enforcement entity that is going to extend immunity to them and will protect them. So we have that in place right now. So anyone listening, contact me. We will keep your name. Look, 80% of everyone's ever come to me, they're in our archive, blackened out and redacted, right? For a reason. Because I don't disclose someone's name unless they say, I'm willing to come forward. Like Michael Herrera, willing to come forward. So he did. He's the only person I ever have met who saw something like that, who lived to tell the tale. It's unbelievable that Herrera wasn't killed.
It's an amazing story.
And a true one. We've had 3 separate senior intel and military people confirm that.
So for the audience, this guy was part of Operation Kitsana, and he was supposed to go to the Philippines. His unit was diverted. His Marine Corps unit was diverted, put in Indonesia. They see this 8-gun, octagon, Vanta Black craft hovering above the treetops. They're closed in on by these seemingly S1 special forces. They don't know if it's special forces, but nondescript guys who are very smooth with their guns, and they have bioscanners and all this kind of high tech. And he later learns from Jake Barber that this was maybe a human trafficking operation, and that they were putting these psionic assets, these people who were meant to be shipped back to the U.S. to summon.
Prospective psionic assets.
Perspectives.
In other words, they were people who had been identified with the predisposition to have those psionic abilities. And those were being crated up and moved back to some covert places where they'd be screened, tested. If they passed a certain level, then they would go through a rigorous training program. Most of them end up in comas or die, by the way. But the ones that survive are very good at what they're doing. But they're basically human tools for these really evil covert programs to essentially hack into these non-human craft communication systems that are interfacing with thought and consciousness.
Do you think
It's like our super high-end version of Neuralink, and move them over into range and hit them with an electromagnetic pulse weapon.
There are rumors that like the show on Netflix, Stranger Things, is like real. And that,
of course, I've talked about all that stuff for years. Montauk and
gifted and talented education programs that I recently met with a pretty senior person in government who I'll anonymize because I don't think he wants to be on record on this, but he mentioned a link between Battelle Memorial Institute and these gifted and talented education systems,
and the Cabal running these UFO programs.
That is
one of the institutes on our list of.
And they manage all of the nuclear sites, all of the U.S. And so if they're, and what's interesting is you often hear stories of people making it past checkpoints in these gifted and talented education programs where you prove that you have, some mind matter capabilities, and then you get to the next thing, and then they'll show you a piece of material. And who would have the material? It would be Battelle Memorial Institute. So
amongst others. I mean, look, there are many. There's a whole military-industrial complex component to this, right?
Yeah.
There are institutes, there are all kinds of foundations. There, it sort of it's like a metastatic cancer that's gone on. Because look, they have a lot of money to spread around.
Yeah.
I met with a man in 1997 before I was over at the meeting with the CIA director in D.C., who said, we have given at least 10,000 people $10 million each or more to secure their cooperation with what we're doing. That was 28 years ago. So, and I know he said at least, so I said, yeah, I'm sure. So, what's your price? And if you have the ability to either be troublesome to them, you're either going to, it's like Gordon, that guy who used to publish Flying Saucer magazine.
Gordon Cooper?
No, not Gordon
Gordon Cooper.
Crichton.
Gordon Crichton, yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed him. He's one of our witnesses because he had been military intelligence. And he published this, and all that used to go over to the palace, and Prince Philip was very keen on all of this.
I've heard that.
Oh, I know for a fact.
Yeah.
And so, because I know the people involved. So he said, if you become too worrisome, you see this interview, it's in our archive, there's certain people who they will erase or do whatever. So, I think people kind of way underestimate the reach of this organization and to extent it has operative embedded. But of course, the grand conspiracy theories are false also. Bohemian Grove. You know what? Maybe 2 of those guys know anything about this. Trilateral Commission, maybe 2 or 3 do. I think that one of the problems with these conspiracy theories is that they're not nuanced and they're all pretty dumb. From the point of view is you can't keep something like this secret with a huge number of people knowing. The number of people read in or read on to anything like this in any detail is going to be very, very tightly controlled. But those assets, well-trained, well-compensated, well-placed. And so, look, I mean, and they don't mind killing one of their own.
Yeah.
When Bill Colby, who had been read into this, tried to get a 0-point device to us and about just a small amount, like $50 million in seed money in 95, I think. The week he was going to meet with a member of my board, they found him floating down the river south of D.C., made to look like a canoeing accident, and his wife knew that he had been killed.
The Stan Myers story, I think you talk about it in your movie, The Lost Century. Just like a car that ran on water, and
he did.
Is that so? Was he taken? He died of an aneurysm, and do you think he is that real or?
His twin brother, who we've met with, and who was really the electronics guy behind all that, Stan Myers' twin, Steve, absolutely is convinced he was poisoned and killed.
And you think that
well, we have 150 substances that can kill people or poison them. So.
What about Pons Fleischmann?
Cold fusion.
Yeah, cold fusion, exactly.
I never met them. They were onto something. And I know people who did much more souped up versions of that. All those devices have ended up being confiscated or the people erased. The guys who bought Stan Myers' archive and all his devices, we were trying to get it, but we didn't have the funding. It went to an engineering group up in Michigan. And there was a man who I didn't know who the money was behind that. So my science advisor, Dr. Loader, went and saw this warehouse full of floppy disk and devices, but he had one thing of great interest. We have a picture of it. It's in our archive, dpiarchive.com. And it looks like a sort of a toroidal electromagnetic, and had a magnetically charged fluid in it. And it was a complete free energy system. So it had a national security order slapped on it way back, but it was sitting there to acquire. And we were going to try to get it and then open source it. Because, memo to Peter Thiel and everyone else, if you try to patent this or release it in the normal, let's just say, traditional venture capital way, it'll never get out, ever. You have to dump it open source, off blockchain, to 2-3 billion people all at once.
That's my belief. I mean,
Well, there's no way. We know. I mean, this is the
Well,
whole point of the lost century was to prove.
Yeah.
I meet with these kind of geniuses. I just met
Yeah.
with a Fortune 10 company senior scientist a couple weeks ago. And he came to LA to meet with me. Because I was on, there's a podcast, sweetest lady ever, named Khloe Kardashian. He was she's so sweet. And she just released yesterday a podcast I did with her. But she was so much fun.
Yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah, she loves your work.
Yeah, I had never met her.
Yeah.
She was very, very kind. And a beautiful person, really. Smart. I thought very smart. But she, so I was out there, this guy flies in, super genius. He can build free energy plasma things. He can do teleportation. But the major corporation he works for won't let him do it. So he wants to work with us, bring it out. And I said, look, don't try to do it through patent. You have to open source it. But if you open source it and you have a reach of a few 100,000 people, no one cares. So I have a network of various influencers and celebrities and can get it to 2-3 billion people all at once. In which case, you squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube so hard, can't put it back in. So these fascists that want to keep us dependent on earth-destroying energy systems forever, you just say, adios. Now, he has the ability to build things that teleport and levitate. I said, nope, don't touch those. So where I think that people in the administration I've spoken to are mirroring what I'm saying about to tell you. And that is, this needs to get disclosed. We need to do it in a way where there's a pathway for the people involved to come clean, but not be imprisoned and not be executed. Because an eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind. Now, if you go back to 93, 4, 5, you'll see what I wrote to the Clinton administration. It was the same set of recommendations. Hardcore people in disclosure say, oh, we should round them up in Nuremberg. I said, no. These guys are holding technologies that are the trump card against everything the Pentagon has.
Yeah, and plenty of them are just taking orders under threats of, their families' lives.
Yes, but I mean, we have to have compassion for that. But even the worst of the actors, they either need to come forward or put on a leash, right, and stood down. Now, to do that, you're going to have a group of people who are special forces trained, and that's the other part of this I can talk about carefully.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a plan maybe to do that?
Oh yes, it's already been in place for about a year and a half, 2 years.
So what is that? Does that involve storming Area 51 and Dugway and a right pad, or what does this involve?
Yeah.
Literally. Wow. Okay.
Well, they either capitulate
Yeah.
to the legal government of the United States,
Yeah.
or they're declared treasonous operations, and then they're put under proper authority and oversight.
Don't they have the secret weapons that can,
Correct.
aren't we unmatched?
So
That's the reason.
So
I
let me
haven't-
finish the story with Admiral Wilson. We keep
Yeah.
getting diverted. So at the very end of the meeting,
Yeah.
he said to me, I asked him, can you help? He says, well, the best thing I have is a B-2 stealth bomber that I know about. And I have learned, he didn't say not what from me, but what I've learned directly is that there's an organization that have things that can do circles, the man-made UFOs, the ARVs, around my B-2 stealth. So he says, so it's checkmate. It's point, set, match. It's over. I said, no, sir. We cannot. It is David. The entire United States United States of America constitutional government is the David, and this organization is the Goliath. You remember that, which is why so many presidents and so many senators and so many military guys I met with, they get to the edge of this precipice and they go, God, mother of God, and they back off.
I wonder.
But there's a way around it.
Okay.
So where the Achilles heel of that organization is that their numbers are very thin. The subject's coming out and they know the public opinion is going to go against them. And then because their numbers are thin, they can be overwhelmed in a tactical operation. The other thing is their OPSECs are very good, operational security, but they cannot withstand the full force of a serious, quote, investigation and operation, tactical operation. Now, what they do have is technological superiority. And that can be vitiated through some technologies I don't want to talk about, where basically you can go in and neutralize. It's fire against fire, but I'll just tell you, you can go in and neutralize the facility without a bomb. And it deals with electromagnetic systems that are advanced scalar systems. And, there's a scientist who talked at our 2023 conference right before the National Press Club event we did, where Herrera spoke. And he was a senior GE physicist and scientist who specializes in scalar. So, look, we have assets where I could say, all right, go in, so you could just, their man-made UFOs and all their other stuff, can neutralize it. That's all I'm going to say. But I'm just saying that you have to have an executive order from the president to provide the protections to these high-value whistleblowers. You need personal security. You need to authorize a law enforcement operation, both CONUS and OCONUS, United States and outside continental United States is OCONUS, which can be done. And then you need to fund it. It'd be, classified funding. And then you also need to have a pathway for when you acquire all this materiel out of Dugway and the Edwards Complex and Lockheed Skunk Works underground and Northrop's underground and Raytheon's, what do you do with it? And we're recommending the stuff that flies is kept secret in terms of it being, it has to be acknowledged we have it. We all know we have thermonuclear weapons, but you can't go to Ace Hardware store and buy one. So it has to get acknowledged properly. But we just say, right now, the world is too unstable to let every tin-pot dictator or terrorist in the world have something that can go from Mogadishu to D.C. in 3 minutes and drop a dirty bomb, right? There are valid national security concerns about some of these technologies. And the world is not at that place. The world is at the place where something that could sit on this table that would run this building without pollution.
Can
right?
we?
And there, what happens then? The Malthusian problem gets fixed.
Malthusian.
The Malthusian problem gets fixed because you have something where you're going to eliminate in about 20 years global poverty. Much of terrorism and radicalization is the have and have not problem. And because we're so narcissistic and self-turned inward looking in America, we don't realize 3 billion people on the planet don't even have energy to cook their food. That's why they're chopping down the rainforest or chopping down the brush and the deserts keep growing. Because it's like a pack of locusts that are just ripping everything out. But it's because of the severe, mind-numbing, inhumane, I tell Christians, unchristian poverty that we've imposed. But that's based on the energy system. You're never going to fix it with wind and solar, ever. Or with a plug-in electric car. It's never going to get fixed. Now, these new technologies will fix that. It'll fix the biosphere, fix pollution, end poverty, stabilize geopolitically. Now, they're going to be losers. Hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets and commodities. But again, it isn't going to happen like this. It's not like downloading an app. These are heavy industries. It's going to take at least 15 to 20, 30 years to transition from our current cars and electric grid to what I'm talking about. And I don't know that we have 30 years, so we need to get going. So my point to people is that in the administration, and I had this little debate with Patrick David on his show, is that this, taking decades to do this could have been done in the 20s, 30s, 40s. This is 2025. We have 8 billion people on the planet living like we're like in the 1800s, energy-wise. Oil, gas, coal, blah, 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 wind. The Dutch had that ages ago. Okay, so we have a little bit of extra. Nuclear, 1940s. So are you telling me the whole world has to run on stuff that's 80 to 120 years old? This is ridiculous. But it benefits a very, very tiny oligarch ruling group of people on the planet. Energy, banking, petrodollar, I mean, we're not talking about a few hundred billion. We're talking about several $100 trillion. But if we're destroying the biosphere, and what their solution is, well, let's just keep diverting people with shiny little problems. In 9/11, aliens that are scary. See, that's the next big thing. This is what Werner von Braun. This is where when people spread that kind of nonsense, I am going to go after them like a goddamn Rottweiler, because that is how we end up in World War III. That's how we end up in a totalitarian, militaristic superstate. The opposite of the Golden Age, the opposite of an age of enlightenment, the opposite of a sustainable world. That's the end of the world as we know it. And I tell people, even if there are some ETs that really are ETs and not from another dimension or a man-made diversion that are troublesome, you think you're going to win that war down the barrel of a gun? No. You're going to do CE5 contact. Go get the app. Anyone can get it. It works. William Shatner has it and did it and went up in space. So go get it. Barber and others will tell you that concept absolutely works. Because what we have to do is figure out, if we're having any kind of conflict, is it always going to get solved through a kinetic war? Well, that's the end of the world. Because you're not dealing with thermonuclear weapons. You're dealing with weapons that would make a hydrogen bomb look like a tinker toy. So when you start getting into technologies that can affect space-time, where you could dissociate basically the material of an entire planet, poof. No, you don't go there. So this is a serious, see, for most people, they look at too much science fiction and Hollywood crap and way too much ufology, where it mixes in all these rubbish and false narratives and myths with the truth. But if you think about this as a really serious person, even if there was a civilization or one or two, that might be troublesome. And I don't think there's any evidence there is, but you can't prove a negative. So let's be devil's advocate. No, I'll be the advocate of what 99% of my colleagues say. There are these worrisome aliens that we have to fight, and where are you going to fix that? How are you going to fix that? Through a war? Through conflict? Well, it would last about 0.1 nanoseconds. No, this is stupid. That is a suicide mission. So if we're going to be serious about this, then we have to think, well, even if that were the case, and I don't think it is at all, neither does Jake, because here's the thing too, every man, and they've all been men so far, who have been operational on those retrieval teams that I've been meeting with back all the way to the early 90s, not a single one of them, when they encountered a living one, said they were anything but very peaceful and very enlightened and very kind, but very concerned about humanity and what we're doing to the earth and to ourselves and potentially to them. Because remember, now let's cut this to the bottom line here. The reason we're running out of time is that the technology curve from the 40s to now has gone like that. So right now, and Jake will admit this, the non-human ET craft and the really advanced ones from Raytheon and some of the other companies are virtually indistinguishable. But that also means the technology that can be weaponized is at that level, which means humans, this corrupt organization, not under the control of the president, the Congress, and the Pentagon, is becoming a threat to other worlds. This is where we cross a red line. And I've known about it for 30 years. And I'm telling people we are right there. We're right at that point. And that you do not want to cross that red line to a point where there has to be an intervention from out there, right? But I think there are people in this crazy corrupt organization, this transnational corrupt organization that runs this and a bunch of other stuff, who would like to see that, because I learned this in '94 from the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, Hans Adam.
He seems super into this topic. He's popped up a few times. Didn't he take all the Roswell witnesses and fly them out to Europe and meet with them? And so you've met him too? And
oh yeah, I spent a whole afternoon with him.
And he's
he's part of the organization.
He is.
Oh, he was Opus Dei. He funds Opus Dei, a really far right-wing group at the Vatican. And I spent a lot of time with him.
But you like him? You find him of pure intention, or?
No, his intention,
Uh-huh.
I was going to tell you this, listen.
Uh-huh.
So this long meeting was very disturbing.
Uh-huh.
And it was at the Pierre Four Seasons in New York, there on Fifth Avenue, across from Central Park, and he had a suite. We wanted to meet for a while, and I couldn't deconflict my schedule as an emergency doctor and his schedule. And we finally got together in New York because he was coming to visit Lawrence Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this long meeting, and he told me, he says, the reason I'm funding Bud Hopkins, and even back then John Mack and some other people, is that, and David Jacobs,
Mm-hmm.
is
He,
that
he had the threat narrative, David Jacobs.
is that we want the public to hate the aliens so bad that we can have an interplanetary war, so that we'll have Armageddon, so Christ will return. I'm quoting. That's that agenda. So it's an eschatology is to study how the world ends. So from that point of view, this, instead of having a future, a new world, if you can take it, as the ET said to Colonel Corso, that story is great, a new world that we could go forward for hundreds of thousands of years as an event. Let's end the world so Christ will come back, the Messiah. So there's a weird part of this organization that's corrupt that has this firm belief that we have to provoke an interplanetary conflict. And that's how the world comes to an end, and that's how Christ comes back. Now, when I heard this, I just listened. And I was, of course, horrified and stultified. I went, what the fuck? You know, WTF, and I didn't say it. But I just wanted to hear, where are you really coming from in the organization you're a part of? Because he was part of that. Oh, sure.
So he wanted to speed up the end of the world so Christ could return.
Which is why he was funding all the abduction groups and researchers.
You know, I've heard.
He was funding them because those were the frontline people. So a lot of those were innocent people. They would have someone who, a CIA special operations team or some other group that had one of these man-made flying saucers or discs, would abduct someone. That case would then be channeled through a couple cutouts to David Jacobs, or Bud Hopkins, or John Mack. Now, they didn't know that I was debriefing people who were the ones operating the abduction program that was human. Same thing with cattle mutilations. Linda Moon-Howe thinks those are aliens. No, we're doing that.
So there's all this talk now of disclosures. You have disclosures around the JFK assassination. People want the 9/11 records. They want,
Good luck.
all these things. They want Epstein stuff. And so,
Excuse me.
do you think we get any progress on UFOs? And then
Yes.
maybe even the better question, because UFOs are such, it's so complicated. It's this gangly octopus. It's so hard to kind of find where the bodies are buried, so to speak.
No, it's not.
Yeah, maybe not. So you think it is? It's easy?
Oh,
but what I was going to go
here's
is,
what we're doing.
Yeah.
The actual intelligence
Yeah.
that they need, that like Mr. Grush was provided some of,
Yeah.
that could lead to hitting pay dirt.
Yeah.
We have a huge amount of it. Other people I'm working with who have been former or current special forces have a lot of it. That can be provided to the operation I'm talking about that's being looked at, but that needs an executive order from the president. This
Do
is
you
the
think
one
that's gonna
pager
happen?
for the president.
Is that going to happen? Do you think he's going to listen and sign an executive order? His son seems very into the issue.
Oh, Don Jr., I spoke with him briefly. Yeah. No, they're very interested. Unfortunately, Don Jr. got gaslit about a lot of this by Elizondo with false information. Joe Rogan has totally been misled.
Your episode with Rogan got deleted or something?
Well, in order to get his money from Spotify, they had to take it out.
Really?
Oh, of course.
But
It's like when Sean Ryan had on me show in Herrera. Shortly after that, he got threatened. I can't be on that show anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Am I going to get fucked with?
No, I mean, you don't have the numbers. If you had 20 million people,
Well,
maybe.
I guess that's good.
Or the question is, what dirt do they have on you?
No, I think I'm pretty straight up.
So if you don't care about being bought off with money,
No,
I'm
I
assuming
don't.
you have some assets.
Yeah, doing all right.
And yeah, so if you're not corruptible with money, and if you're not somebody who's going to try to jump the shark by getting on the inside for the technologies, is what happened. That was Bigelow's Achilles heel. Robert Bigelow,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not afraid, and you don't have something they could blackmail you with.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Do you think Bob Bigelow has a warehouse with UFOs in them in Vegas?
no.
You don't.
No, I can tell you that Colonel Alexander, who was his consigliere, that was all set up so that the $22 million that Harry Reid helped get to Bigelow Aerospace to research this would be, here's what that operation was. Send the money to that. Now, Bigelow didn't know this. He really didn't. He was innocent. It was Alexander who did all the gaslighting. Send the money to there. They get the money. The Pentagon thinks they're going to get a serious research effort. You might as well have opened the toilet lid, flushed $22 million down to the sewer, because that was a setup. And I spoke to General Bob Herbert, who had left the military and was right hand to Senator Reid, about this a few years ago during COVID, and another senior operative who worked with him. And they said to me, we didn't get anything of any value out of all those millions of dollars. I said, no, because the person who was actually directing that operation is someone who has been key to covering this up for decades as part of this rat pack of guys named Colonel Alexander, who, by the way, is the consigliere and mentor for one Lou Elizondo. Okay, so look, I'm not going to mince words with you. I know you've gotten all submerged in this stuff and it's all mixed up in your brain, but I'm trying to give a little clarity. I know people hate that I'm so direct about this, but I'm the kind of, I tell people, if you have a brain tumor, I'm not going to tell you have a migraine, right? I'm going to say, hey, bro, I'm sorry, you got a brain tumor, it's got to come out. But that's just how I run. I'm a very direct person.
Yeah.
But so that operation really was sad because, man, I really think what Bigelow wanted to do, and I remember meeting with him privately after the Rockefeller meeting, is that he wanted to get on the inside of the tech and what was really going on with the intelligence community. Because he was a Las Vegas billionaire. He was an heir to a real estate fortune in Vegas.
And budget suites, right?
And all that, yeah. So he had the money, so he didn't need the money, but he wanted the access. So they find what your soft spot is. Where's your soft underbelly? Some people, they just want to get rich. Some people, they just want to get in a position of power. Some people, if they're already rich and powerful, they want to get on the inside of this big secret. So that's how they got their hooks in him. And I warned him of that. Same thing with Joe Firmage that got pulled in and was...
This was this tech entrepreneur who
Yes,
got
from
super
Salt Lake
into
City.
anti-gravity. Yeah.
And he got totally gaslit and pulled into an operation. It ruined his life.
And then he got put in prison for something?
And I warned him, this is going to be an op. You're going to spend your money and all this time, because he took the same bait. He was wealthy. And I met with him at the Mars Cafe in South of Market in San Francisco way back in the 90s. And I said, Joe, you're a mark for these guys. And sure enough, that same group of people intercepted him. Peter Thiel was almost intercepted by some of these people.
Really?
For energy, technology stuff, with Hal Puthoff and some others.
Peter?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah, they were going to get 100.
The guy that I've worked with?
Yeah, they were going to get 150 million of his that would be flushed down the toilet.
Hal Puthoff? No, I don't think so.
Yes, sir.
Not.
I got a heads up from the senior most CIA guy, and I back channeled that information to Eric Weinstein. But
I've met with, because I'm open about this. I brought Hal into the office, but nothing ended up happening. So
they're putting him out. Look, he's up in his 80s, I guess now.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of these guys. They have to find a replacement. But no, he was an operative that was, probably his closest friend ever is on my team, and I know the whole backstory. Same thing with Jacques Vallée, great guy, brilliant guy. But at some point, he got too far involved with that same cabal of people and got corrupted. And this is why, in our documentary, we talk about the document that he admits to having. It's in his 1992 book that Jacques Vallée wrote. I forget the name of it. And there's an entry where he talks about having a 1985, and that was when he was really got involved with the Colonel Alexander types and Stubblebine types.
The Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group.
No. Well, just let me finish. The document is a description of CIA operations in Argentina and Brazil to abduct peasants so that they think they're being abducted by aliens for its, quote, I'm quoting, psychological warfare value. Now, we've asked Jacques Vallée to release that document. He got very agitated against my research producers and said, no way, because I think he knows that that is the core of the cover-up, is the false convincing of the public of an alien threat. But this is a black and white CIA document Jacques Vallée has, and I know a couple other people have it, but they've been threatened, that outlines that operation. So these abduction programs have operated not just U.S., but also overseas for decades. Remember, that's a 40-year-old document, 85. And those programs were started well before then.
Well, I will say Charles Douglas Jackson, who ran psychological warfare for the country and was operated in the Psychological Strategy Board under Gordon Gray, he showed up at Betty and Barney Hill's house 2 weeks after they encountered what they encountered. So I've always found that to be kind of interesting. And then he went on to work for Life and Time magazine, and he was responsible for putting out the Zapruder film of JFK getting shot with missing frames.
Right.
So maybe there's something kind of weird there. I don't know.
Well, I'm telling you there is. I mean, this is the part of this. I call it the mythology. In the briefing document for the president, I take out some of the names that I know are the operatives doing it. But I have it's a one-sheeter. On one side is the myth, and the other is the truth. And who are the purveyors of the myth, and what is the actual facts of it?
Yeah.
And unpacking it is a very arduous, complicated, and I'll admit, I didn't know what I'm just telling you back in 1990, 94. It came from being pulled in by people who wanted me to know the truth, who are these deep throats. Some of these 800 people I've debriefed. But there are documents that would prove this, like Jacques Vallée has that document. The law enforcement and the president should say subpoena that.
Do you think Nixon was taken out over this issue with Watergate? Because
I
you
do.
said Deep Throat. The real Deep Throat was a guy named Mark Felt, who's a deputy director of the FBI.
Correct.
In his biography, he talks about Nixon being shown covert technology. And then there's this famous story of Nixon showing up at Jackie Gleason's place in 1973 and telling him we have secret UFO technology, taking him to Homestead Air Force Base.
Yep.
And then Jackie Gleason gets obsessed with UFOs. His house becomes shaped like a UFO.
I know.
So he says, that story, is that all true? And
100% true, but it goes back further. So let's explain how national security in the 50s, maybe from the 50s on, the chairman of what's called the Space Council for the United States government is the vice president traditionally. Now they have a professional director, but the vice president is chairman. So Nixon was chairman of the Space Council during Eisenhower. He was part of the team that betrayed Eisenhower, along with these others. So they circled their wagons and their limousines and pushed Eisenhower further out of the picture.
the 5412 committee?
So they were very upset. I mean, obviously. So Nixon, of course, lost the election with Jack Kennedy, and then he won in '68. So when he was going to be in his second term, he was going to be the person he thought would disclose all this and start bringing it forward. But the organization that's way more powerful than the presidency said, oh, no, you're not. He said, oh, yes, I am. Oh, no, you're not. So Watergate did happen. But I mean, there's that kind of black bag stuff happens all the time in politics. I mean, it's not, I'm not excusing it. It's just, it's a dirty business, a filthy business. So what happened is that there was a young reporter named Bob Woodard who was actually naval intelligence and Pentagon. He was not a journalist. He got moved over to the Washington Post, happened to have this whistleblower who then the cover was, let's expose the corruption that Nixon did, which he did. But it was really to remove him because he was hell-bent on bringing this stuff out. So a similar thing, of course, happened to Bill Clinton, the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. Linda Tripp was Army intelligence NSA person, was put right beside Monica Lewinsky at a cubicle to get through social engineering, befriending her, the information about that affair.
Wow.
And then it was set up, because when he was asked about it, Clinton lied about it under oath, which it led to his impeachment. That was also, and so when Hillary said, and I'm not excusing any kind of behavior, I'm not trying to,
Sure.
but I'm just telling you, this is how it is done. All right? So they can either kill you, they can threaten you, they can do all kinds of stuff, or they can set up something like that, because very few people get at that level of national politics that are squeaky clean. And they're going to know that, and they can use it against you. So this is where people talk about lawfare and all this stuff going on. It's been done for decades. I mean, let's face it. Nixon weaponized the IRS and the DOJ long before the people in the Trump circle started talking about lawfare. That's a proven thing.
Do you think there's any connection?
And Nixon was a Republican.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, this kind of dirty trick stuff's been going on since forever.
Speaking of dirty trick stuff, is there any connection between Jeffrey Epstein and UFOs?
I have no idea. And I actually, the salacious stuff related to that, it's like, oh my God. I'm not excusing any kind of underage whatever, but I think that was probably a op to try to pull in certain people and then have a blackmail file on them.
Yeah, that seems like it.
And I'm speaking with some absolute knowledge about it, because there's a very senior person in the national security apparatus who was part of that, who's being kept on a short leash because they have a blackmail file on him.
Wow.
And so that's how it's done. So, I could do a whole 5-hour podcast with you about the techniques of counterintelligence and disinformation on this and the kind of dirty tricks run on people. And if they can't get something real, they'll make it up, because with AI and deepfakes, I mean, they could show everyone in this room having an orgy together. Right? They can take my voice and make me say anything. They can create any docs they want. It'll look absolutely authentic. In fact, I just had that happen last week. My iPhone was hacked into and all kinds of stuff.
Jesus.
I was threatened.
Oh, no.
Oh, this has been happening since '91.
Do you think that isn't Tesla's stuff still classified by the U.S.? And then I know Townsend Brown's is classified by the Navy. So we're talking about classifications of all these other things and declassifications of all these other things. What about the science? Fundamental science shouldn't be classified. Can we get Tesla's work open source?
Here's the problem. Everything that doesn't fly or teleport should and could be declassified. I mean, a lot of it be medical. I mean, I've seen some technologies at a underground lab on the Mexican-American border,
really?
El Paso, that you could regrow a limb, a severed spinal cord could be corrected.
Are you serious?
Yes.
But that's not being widely distributed?
No, because the physics behind it, I don't know if you have a physics background. The physics behind that.
Scalar.
No, trans-dimensional physics would be able to also quickly, to any scientist, be converted to, I can generate energy from that. All right? So if you, in the energy sector that runs the planet, where everyone's dependent on this line of super tankers and power plants and all of that, the whole Bretton Woods with the petrodollar, the dollar being the reserve currency because of petroleum, basically. Aramco in Saudi Arabia was basically set up by the CIA. So all of that integrated macroeconomic issue is really one of the core reasons for the secrecy. And so any technology that would open that door, they don't want out, because it threatens the current order.
Yeah.
And when I explained this to the Honorable Paul Hellyer, who had been Minister of Defense, I was one of the reasons why he came out publicly. We did a press conference together in Toronto. Before he contacted me, he contacted a 4-star general in the United States, because he read a book called The Day After Roswell by Philip Corso. And then he realized, this 4-star general, he said, "Is this true?" He says, "Oh yeah, that and more." That general had been read on to it. And so he called me up and we met, and I spent a lot of time at his place in Toronto. And I explained to him the whole macroeconomic order, how it runs, who runs it, etc. And it turned out he was a macroeconomist. And he said, I've never connected UFOs and ETs to the science and technology part dealing with energy. I say, well, bingo. That's the heart of it right there. That and the militarization of the relationship between humans and non-human, so that the military-industrial complex can be this global behemoth that keeps sucking money out of the people and governments in endless war.
Have you heard the name Tim Taylor ever?
No, I don't know him.
What about Ron Pandolfi? Have you heard that name?
Oh, sure.
What do you think of him? Is he, because he comes up a lot in this topic as, you know, somebody interested in it, and is he?
You know, look, I mean, you bring up names a lot. You know what Eleanor Roosevelt said?
Yeah, she did. So you're insulting me.
You know, small minds talk about people, mediocre minds talk about events, great minds talk about ideas.
So you don't want to talk about Pandolfi?
Well, there are a lot of, you can name a list forever. Yes, of course he has been involved and knows things. And I think he's another person who's very knowledgeable and had been read on very early on in his career, and who I think I believe, really wants a correct outcome.
Okay.
Okay, so I think there are a lot of people that are, you know what one of Jake's guys said to me, wonderful man, brilliant, named Don Paul. I don't know if you know Don Paul.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I saw him get interviewed, and Jake
just a
speaks
wonderful
very
man. And
yeah.
he had picked me up once in LA when I was doing something, and he dropped me off. I don't know, at an Airbnb where I was staying, and he said, Dr. Greer, thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side. Now, what he meant by that, we're stuck in the side of these illegally run, shadowy legacy programs, but they're patriots. They're good men and women. They want out, but they need a way out. So that's what I'm trying to get the president through these 5 executive orders. Here they are, one page.
Awesome.
It's put in his hands.
Yeah.
You know, he has this.
Very cool.
We'll
link it.
One of them has to be this complete amnesty and immunity and physical protection of these people so they can come forward with everything they have, right? But you can't expect people to do that naked, uncovered, when if they're doing so could result in their families being killed or they're being imprisoned under false pretenses.
Of course.
So I tell people, what good is there having an FBI, is what I'd say to Mr. Cash Patel, if it's not going to be used against the worst criminal enterprise within the U.S., the true deep state, that is victimizing patriots and heroes, trying to come forward. I mean, this nonsense needs to come to a screeching halt. And a lot of these men and women, that's what they're waiting for. And we got really close to it when the Congress was supposed to pass that bill to give them safe harbor or amnesty and protect them. But it was gutted by Turner, Rogers, Pelosi, some other people.
For the skeptics out there, do you have a most kind of visceral, convincing piece of evidence that you've seen in your life, or you're in possession of, either a document or a piece of material where you're like, this is disclosure for me? You know, this is kind of obvious.
It was the weight of the evidence, and you know, I don't have a dead ET body or a craft I can haul out. But that's what I'm hoping this special operations team can acquire.
Well, there you go.
Because we know where they are.
Do you feel like you're being?
So I know where you know, if you look at our map, that's in. Hold that up. This is the brief. There is a map in there that actually has where all the key black sites are and where all this stuff is.
We'll throw it on.
But it's all based on, frankly, intel from all these whistleblowers.
Yeah, well, you had deep underground military bases are across the U.S., and Bechtel has built a lot of them. I think we used techniques used by the Nazis, actually, World War II.
No, because in our archive we have the actual 1960s patent for a nuclear-powered tunneling device. And let me explain how it works. It goes through bedrock and basically turns it into glass.
Whoa.
And so you have connectors from Nellis, Area 51, to Edwards, go underground, boom, dug way from the Capitol out to the mountains in Virginia. These have all been built. Now, of course, they don't want to disclose because it's a nuclear-powered thing if it malfunctioned. But it's a nuclear-powered device that Bechtel and other corporations have used to build not only the connectors, but the deep underground facilities. Most people call them STIFs, subterranean facilities. Some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases. But it's a bit of a misnomer because military would connote the legal military. So you have the shadow government military that Senator Inouye talked about, and you have the conventional. Now, when I was briefing the senior investigators for Senate Intelligence Committee, when I first started meeting with them, they didn't know we had these facilities. They didn't know we had man-made UFOs. They didn't know the NRO had neutrino light detectors on them, picking up the signature of the ET craft and knocking them down. They didn't know, and the list goes on and on. And interestingly, the main guy I was talking with, in his portfolio of oversight for the Senate Intelligence Committee was the NRO, CIA, and NSA. Totally had no knowledge of it. So I tell people, this is where it gets scary for me as a young doctor, when I discovered something this important is being taken out of the hands of the oversight of we, the people's government, the government that we elect and the people we appoint. And then the people who are in that system, because they're there, are basically not answering to the Constitution, the president, or the will of the people and the Congress. They're answering to this cabal of corrupt enterprises. And that is a very dangerous thing when you're dealing with technology at this level, and the human future. And this is where I'm fiercely, you know what it is? I feel like I'm a one-man anti-defamation league for ETs. Because everyone out there wants to have the good ones and the bad ones, where we're going to have Star Wars and cowboys and Indian in space and an endless war of... I'm going, oh my God, can we just grow up out of that? I mean, this is so, first of all, it's so stupid. I mean, it's dumb. I mean, it's like...
But it's hard to speculate on these things. I mean...
No, it isn't.
We don't have great data. Like
you don't, because you haven't studied my stuff. We have great data.
I've been looking through it.
Go look up this reference that Jacques Vallée's document from the CIA has. It black and white says we're conducting the abductions. But it's not just in the United States. These operations are global. So again, the other thing I said, so in the SCIF, a secure compartment information facility, I'm in there and there's a map on the wall. And it's a normal map of the world with all the geopolitical boundaries. I said, see that map? The boundary between America and Canada, erase it. The boundary between Mongolia and China, erase it. The boundary between wherever, India and China, it's gone. This organization moves with alacrity across the globe because their technologies allow complete covert movement, invisible movement. And they have assets everywhere. We know that there have been apparently a man-made UFO that went down in Russia. We've gotten that confirmed recently from a special operations team.
Wow.
And there was one that crashed and went down in northern Iran that we had to try to go in and stomp down. But you know, we have this is the next one that just came out. Ouch, hurts to bend. I have these 3 big puncture things in my abdomen. So this is Disclosure and Illustrated History, and it's a 220, 30-page book that has, you know, all the, I wonder where the Herrera one is.
Yeah.
So
check it
they have all these cases. Oh,
It's amazing.
here's the Tic Tac.
Oh, there you go. San Diego, California, 2004.
Yeah, but we have one in there as a contrast from 1967 in Pennsylvania and 1991 off the Azores. Here is the Raytheon Triangle at Fort Irwin.
Whoa.
That is man-made.
Wow.
And the guy who saw it in detail, because he picked up some night scopes he was told not to, saw that there was this one, and then they were holographically projecting several others.
Wow.
This could be used in a false alien invasion, you know, like a hoaxed invasion. And then that later, he and his wife got abducted by this thing.
Yeah.
and tortured.
Whoa.
And it was Raytheon. And everyone, I would say
Do
out
you
of a
have proof?
million people,
Do you
not
have
a,
proof that it was Raytheon?
oh yeah, because he said the men who took him there were Raytheon operatives. They took him aside, wanted to show him this, but not without the night scope. So he saw more detail than they wanted, and for that reason, it ruined his life. Stephen Digna, wonderful man.
Wow. And Werner von Braun was convinced that there would be this sort of false flag
Sure,
operation.
because he knew when he died in '74, that was all fully operational.
You work with his assistant, right?
His last spokesperson for his life, Carol Rosin's on our team, wonderful woman.
Yeah.
She's been trying to get a treaty signed that should have been signed decades ago, keeping these weapons out of space.
Didn't she also tell you, though, that
I'll let
Werner
you find
von
the
Braun,
Herrera one. Huh?
that Werner von Braun used psychotronic weapons technology against her or something? Used some psychotronic technique?
It wasn't against her. It was for him to transmit to her a speech he wanted to give to a big conference.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he used like a mind...
Interface, yeah.
Wow.
A Neuralink sort of thing, but without the wires. You know what Elon's working with Neuralink, think of it, what Jake's talked about with psionics. Think of being able, this is where my specialty came in, back in after my contact experience in '73, is I realized that these civilizations have technologies that interface directly with coherent thought. So not just any scattered thing, but like if you like, the consciousness field is not limited by space-time, and which means it is essentially omnipresent. So if you operate at a level of understanding that, and then with thought, intend, you can reach any place in space-time, but also you can transmit information that way. And it can be received, but they're not just doing it telepathically like gurus. They have technologies. It would look like a little box or a little device that can receive directed thought, can send and transmit. So in 1991, I wrote a paper, went all through the aerospace industry and CIA, which kind of also put me on the radar, talking about technology-assisted consciousness, right? Where your technology can assist you in the ability, but also consciousness-assisted technology, where your thought, bioelectric field and thought, can actually turn on a computer or affect remote places. But it can be done innately, just through those powers and abilities that some telepathic and telekinetic people have. But it can be done technologically assisted. So that's why I call it TAC and CAT. So that's in my first book, Extraterrestrial Contact, the Evidence and Implications, but it's from '99. You can still get it. But I think that describes this, and that is exactly what they have. So interstellar communications don't involve a smartphone going at the speed of light. They involve node-to-node quantum entanglement. So if you know what quantum entanglement is, every point in space is connected to every other in sort of a holographic non-locality. And so whether you're in the Andromeda galaxy and you're here, 2.5 million light years, you're not going with a Verizon signal at the speed of light, because it would take 2.5 million years to go one way, answer the call, it'd be another 2.5 million years. It's going node to node through entanglement. But there are technologies that assist with that. But when you get to that level of physics, you also get into the telekinetic, psionic, telepathic capabilities, which can be interfaced technologically. So that's actually what we're doing with CE5 Contact. We're not using any technologies, but we know our friend, the visitors, they have it. So if you can remote view them, connect to them, and then invite them, we don't summon them. I told Jake, don't use the word summon. You summon your butler. If you're the King of England, you summon your valet. These are not your servants. It's a disrespectful term. We invite them. And so we say what we're trying to do is create a rapprochement and a contact between human and non-human for peaceful purposes. We're not here to summon them over and kill them. So that's the philosophy, let's say, or ethos behind CE5 Contact. And, there are millions of people around the world doing that, and amazing. That gets me the most grief, Jake and I've talked about, other people have talked about. I said, but it's also why the CIA and military intelligence took us most seriously.
Yeah.
Because they knew it worked. I mean, they knew when we had this group in '92 on a beach near Pensacola, and we had this 60 people for a weekend demonstrating this, 4 of these craft just pop right there.
They seem to take intense interest in people who attract UFOs. So in there's Chris Bledsoe, this case in North Carolina, where Hal Povenmire, this longtime NASA
and then
guy,
he's been intercepted by Jim Semivan and other disinformation people who are eschatologists.
So do you think
They're fanatics who want the end of the world.
Do you think Chris Bledsoe actually saw something, or?
Oh, sure. I'm likely. I don't know him. I don't know, because by the time I learned of it, he'd already been intercepted.
But you think he got intercepted? He saw something and then
absolutely. Most people are.
And you think their interest, these military intel guys, their interest is in eschatology, is in like
no, not all of them. I mean, like I said, you can't be simplistic here. Some are about macroeconomics, power, control, military industrial, endless war. Others have this sort of belief system that we have to have some kind of end game Armageddon nonsense in order for Christ to come back, or the Messiah if you're Jewish, or whatever, or the Mitra for Buddhist. All of that is, of course, I think, a misinterpretation of things. I don't think it's the end of the world. It's the end of this era, the opening of another, a golden age. So I think if you look at what the so-called current cycle of the last 400,000 years, that's one cycle. I think we're coming to the end of that cycle and opening a cycle that will be universal. That'll be about another 500,000 years. That'll be marked by universal peace, not just world peace, interstellar travel, a very advanced society here, and people being liberated financially and by the means of work. So their work week will become 10, 15 hours, and they'll be pursuing the development of higher states of consciousness and all these other abilities that are innately within us, the human potential part. So I think that's where we should be going. Now, there are other people when it's like the Hopi prophecy. One line goes up and the other one terminates. The question is, do we want to be on the termination line? No. In which case, the only way to go forward is for our civilization to come out of the dust, like the phoenix out of the ruins.
Rise from the ashes.
Which can happen, but why choose that when we can choose something else?
Yeah.
So right now, the door is open for us to make that choice, individually, collectively. The people who are proffering false information about the alien threat, that we don't have these technologies. If you say we don't have them, then everything going on you can ascribe to aliens when it's not. That's the false flag. That's what I'm going to go after. Because people who say that, they're lying. They're either ignorant or they're lying. Now, Elon Musk recently said on Joe Rogan, he has an all-access pass through Lockheed and Northrop, and we don't have any of these technologies. Right. The best technology out there is his rocket. To be honest with you, I don't know the gentleman. I have no idea if he's not been read on or if he's deliberately deceiving.
What would be your guess?
I wouldn't wager one, because I could see it either way. Because of the level of people I've met with and met with recently.
He's got to know. If in the world in which UFOs and zero-point energy, all these things are real, he's got to be the,
But but here's the problem.
He doesn't have an all-access pass.
I was once at a meeting with a chairman of SRI and AT&T. They have compartment operations that have dealt with this, Bell Labs and all that. This was back in the 90s. And they said to me, we suspect there are projects in our companies, Stanford Research Center, dealing with this, but we weren't read on to them. So there's a very big mistake people make. Oh, he's the president. He's chairman of Senate Intelligence. He's another general I briefed was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, for people who don't know, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, is the top military intelligence organization for the whole Pentagon and military, like CIA is for civilian. And I briefed a 3-star general, Patrick Hughes. He had absolutely gotten him briefing materials before the meeting, like I had for Admiral Wilson and these sort of things. He had no knowledge. And when he made an inquiry, he just got brushed off. And yet I have a disclosure project witness that worked for DIA and also NRO imaging these objects, okay, out in space. And he was very upset, General Hughes, because I'm in the conference room for the general. And I said, look, there are people on your staff who absolutely have been read into this, and they're lying to you.
How does that work? Like, just as
And-
far as there being no clear chain of command, like, how do you have pockets of middle management
It's
that are
corruption.
read in, and then higher up, you know, their superiors don't know what's going on? Because I've heard stories
They're
like that too.
they're huge organizations, and the people who are corrupt, who are getting
So
money
they
out
get
of the
kind of
back.
paid backdoor by the
Of course, they're cut
international
out. They're
transnational.
cutouts.
Uh-huh.
They're operatives, and you know, I mean, there are all kinds of NOCs, non-official cover people.
So this is really an issue of both corporate and American sovereignty, because you're
Sure.
sort of, you have this like backdoor funneling of money in many
Yes,
cases, right?
there's the legal black budget of the United States, right? That the president and a gang of 8, the top people in the Congress know about.
Sure.
Not all the congressmen. And I deal with those folks. But then there's the illegal black budget. And I tell people, let's make it simple for the average person. You know, if we get billed $2 billion for a B-2 stealth bomber, it's probably costing less than $100 million to make it. I mean, come on, once you've made a few of them.
Does B2 stand
the
for
other-
Byfield Brown? Do you think it's Townsend Brown?
Well, wait, let me finish. The rest of the money goes out the back door, the other 1.8 or 1.9 billion, out the back door into these clandestine, illegal, man-made UFO projects. So, you know, I've been over sites where these objects that are man-made come up out of the desert, up through an opening, come up into the air, and they're 100% man-made. And I would say that almost everyone in the normal government, let's call it the regular, would think it was, oh my God, it's a UAP. Well, I guess it is. It's unexplained to them. It's, you know, it's an unknown to them. But see, that's where it's dangerous. Because one of the reasons I had the meeting with General Hughes was one of his colleagues, if you look at our disclosure witness, Merle Shane McDowell, look it up, it's in here. He was working under SYNC Atlantic Command, the Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Command in Norfolk. And they went to a full code zebra alert, which means the facility shut down, you had to have zebra stripes on your badge, or you were shot by the Marines there with M16s. You know, everyone had to be cleared out. So I've been there. It's an underground place. It's where World War III would be fought, all the nuclear submarines that we have. I've been in there. My military escort took me in. Admiral Harry Train back then, this was in the 80s, an object came in off the coast of Newfoundland. And it was what you said about Jack Kennedy trying to deconflict this problem with the Soviets. We thought it was a Soviet object or missile. And so he picked up the red line to the Soviet Union. This was the 80s. It wasn't theirs, it wasn't ours, or that he knew of. It came off down the coast, ended up being on 5 radar stations. We deployed an aircraft to shoot it down. And it couldn't, but it had gun camera, and the admiral and this gentleman saw that footage. I don't have it. It's somewhere. But the admiral was shaken to his family. He had no idea what this was. We could have gone to nuclear war over this mishap. Think about it. The guy sitting there in some commander-in-chief Atlantic Command, 4-star admiral, not read into this. So when I found out the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency wasn't read on, and he's the top of that whole system for military intelligence, I realized this is really dangerous, that people at that level of our government are completely unaware of this and could mistake a man-made UFO with an alien one or something from another country and trigger World War III, either off planet or on planet. So this information is of enormous national security consequence, but it's never been treated that way. See, this is the problem. You know, it's movies, it's podcasts, it's entertainment, but no, this is of the gravest level of national security of anything I've ever heard of. And I've been around a long time, looking at a lot of spooky stuff. So that is where, this is how a country like ours or others sort of stumble into
Yeah.
a war, is what happened with the Iraq and Afghanistan wars.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful here, because here we're not talking about a kinetic war with boom boom, bombs and cannons and the meat grinder of Ukraine and Russia. We're talking about something that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Orders of magnitude more dangerous. And it simply is not being looked at and managed in a way. Now, these executive orders that one, I mentioned the ones about the whistleblowers and having an operation to get these stood down, like the facilities that have been targeting these craft that are ET and knocking them down, that needs to be stood down, because that could lead to World War III. And we need one that requires all these operations to fully disclose within 6 months, or the people involved would be prosecuted for treason and other crimes. We need an executive order to authorize an advanced diplomatic team based on CE5 contact to make peaceful contact with these non-human, because there has been no response from humans that has been anything but denial or violent. How ridiculous. That's why I started this whole project in 1990. It was to address this issue that they're there, but how are we reaching out to them? Nobody is. Not the United Nations, no foreign ministry, our State Department. It's all off, because it's an unknown subject. So that has to be done. And we need an executive order authorizing the review and release of the technologies, as I said, but excluding things that could be used as a weapon system, right? But things that would ameliorate the environmental problems and poverty on the planet, and eventually give the whole world what this executive chairman of this big corporation said, free energy for the whole world, because you're pulling energy out of this subatomic field. Hydrogen atom is key to this, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
we're getting to the weeds here of physics, but
if you were able to separate the oxygen and hydrogen bonds, the hydrogen atom.
I'm talking about the atom. So what people don't, here's the secret about Stan Meyer's little giddy. He didn't know it at the time, because they didn't have the tools to measure it. It was an empirical observation. I mean, it was just observed in the real world. So empiricism is the foundation of most science. Like we can observe the effect of something, like a substance that's in foxglove, the herb, digitoxin, which actually is used in medicine for congestive heart failure. Well, it was discovered 100 and some years ago. We observed the effect, but it was only very recently that we knew what the actual mechanism of action at a molecular and physics level was of this 100-year-old medicine. Same thing with aspirin. We knew it had these effects. We didn't know how it worked until not that long ago. So this man, Stan Meyer, observed an effect that at certain frequencies, water would dissociate into hydrogen and oxygen at less than the Faraday constant, the amount of energy needed to dissociate it. What he didn't know, which has been documented, we mentioned this in our documentary, The Lost Century. If anyone wants to look at it, go to Tubi. It's up there for free. And it describes that when you do the very electrostatic high voltage system he was using at certain frequencies, it creates these tiny little like ball lightning effects that tiny little explosions that activate and perturb, stimulate that 0-point quantum vacuum field. And that's why the energy that he was getting out. In other words, if you just took the energy of oxygen and water, oxygen and hydrogen, that if you separated them into the two gases and burned it, he was getting much more energy than that, but he didn't know where it was coming from. That's where it's coming from. So now we know the physics of that. And I would like to see, if anyone's listening who's actually venture capital, let's start a venture capital fund to do this, because I've got the people who can do it, but we don't have the funding. But here's a warning to you money-grubbing whores. It's gonna be open sourced. It's gonna be like GitHub. It's gonna be put out openly to the public.
We have a mutual friend, Adam Curry. He's super deep in a lot of these technologies.
Oh yeah, he's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, big fan of his.
But someone's gonna have to actually set up a secure lab that would be on, blockchained, but open to the internet. Everything going on is known in real time, no secrets held back. So you're not going to do the whole, here's the problem. People think they're so clever. They're going to work on this and it'll be secret. Yeah, until they kill you. The Stan Meyer guys, those guys who got the Stan Meyer collection and that toroid, all of them but one were killed. Wow. And before they were killed, the Lord, I won't say his name, Lord so-and-so, out of the United Kingdom, who was their funder, called me up and said, Dr. Greer, we need your help. Day late and a dollar short. They're after them. They figured out how these things work, and they think they need to move their lab from Michigan to another country. I said, bro, you're going to have to move your lab to another star system. This organization will hunt you down anywhere. And what they need to do is dump everything they have through blockchain on the internet and out to the public. But see, they had such a, excuse my language, they had a hard-on for getting the money and monetizing it and keeping it, their own little secret thing. Next thing so I wrote a whole page, a couple page thing, strategy for them. I think it's in our archive. It is. But taking the name off of the Lord so-and-so, because he doesn't want to be known publicly. But
that's amazing, though. Somebody in the House of Lords was funding this free energy project.
Well, I mean, everyone's interested in this if you've got a thinking mind and you're concerned about the world, if you care about the world at all. But it was done incorrectly. So, and I warned them at the front end of it. I said, if you do this the way you're planning to do it, you're dead men walking. Sure enough, a few years later, I meet with a guy in Orange County who knew the one survivor of that. He says, and the guy was crying like a baby. He said, all the rest were killed. I said, of course. What do you think would happen? They were obscure, secret, unprotected. And I don't care if you're Elon Musk, you don't have enough money to keep yourself safe from that crowd.
How do you think
So you have to open source it.
How do you think you've been able to survive? Attempts have been made on your life, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And do you feel protected by the ETs?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
You're guided by them?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
They have a security team. And
wow. That's amazing. Like a physical security team, or it's more like sort of ephemeral as far as how they...
No, it's both. Yeah. But look, they can move between dimensions. And
wow.
Look, when I died, one of the great things of having been so sick and died, this is kind of worse because, but if you have that kind of experience, I'm not particularly religious at all, but in terms of organized religion, but spiritual, yes. And Jake and I have talked about that. Is that what you're afraid of? What? If you know that your conscious self continues in higher and higher states of consciousness forever, why are you make my day and kill me? I've seen the other side. It's beautiful. So I don't want to, I have 12 grandkids and 4 daughters. I'm not going anywhere unless it's my time. My ticket gets punched, I'm out, but so I sort of give it to the Great Spirit, and say what happens, happens. But what it means is it liberates you from having your life guided through fear. So remember how controlling fear is. Fear of the aliens, fear of Armageddon, fear of being tortured, fear of poverty, fear of having your secrets exposed, these evildoers, these thugs, control through fear.
Yes.
But remember, fear is the mind killer. It makes people take leave of their intellect and their spiritual faculties. So that is why demagogues, religious, political, what have you, they're very adept at utilizing fear for control. That's my big concern and my beef with most people in the UFO subculture who put out these fearsome, dystopian views of the ETs, but also at the same breath cover up the fact we have the technology to stage everything that would look ET that isn't. So with that being said, if it's just at a UFO conference with a few hundred aficionados of this, that's one thing. But when it gets to where someone like that is in major media or talking to Don Jr., this nonsense, I have a problem with that. because that has consequences. So people need to be very careful about that, because there's a whole team of people who are attached to senior national security now who know that's going on. And if we can get a law enforcement operation stood up, not just to investigate, because we're doing that, but to actually act, take action, anyone on the wrong side of this, wittingly, knowingly, is going to be in a world of trouble, because you're really talking about colluding with a treasonous group of people who are an imminent threat to national security.
Why?
So I say that, and people say, are you making a threat? I said, no, I'm just saying that it goes to follow that once people at a certain level, a government realized that they've been had and they've been deceived and lied to, they have the mechanism to fix it. Now, maybe it would be fixed clandestinely, we wouldn't know about it. Fine. But I'm saying to the public, anyone who has actionable intelligence needs to come forward to us very soon. If you're on the wrong side of this, we can get you on the right side, and we can get you immunity, right? We can. Now, even without an executive order, law enforcement at a certain level has the ability to immunize people. If, big if, they completely come clean. So it's transactional in the sense that you would have to come clean with everything and not be involved any further into illegal operations, and then you would be immunized. So I was told a few months ago that can be done. So I'm making an appeal to people. Now, if you're going to do it, now's the time to do it. You don't want to. You want to be on the right side of history. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this, because ultimately truth will come out about it, and it's going to be better for people if they do what Jake and his guys are trying, or just starting to do a little bit, and step over into the correct side of it.
What do you think of his new private venture, his company?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, wish him luck. I mean, so long as it's non-kinetic against the ETs, it's fine. I think mostly what they're encountering are our stuff.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because
it's on a range where our stuff might fly or something. Or
look, remember, 80-90% of everything people see out there, they're calling a UAP, is our stuff. I mean, and a lot of it is so advanced now, it can mimic an ET object. So it takes a lot of information and experience to distinguish the two.
But he would have the experience, right, to distinguish?
No, he even admits that it's at the point that, and I will admit, that as I said earlier, this technology curve keeps going up of human reverse engineering. So when you've had some of the highest IQ brains in the world, gifted, who worked in these programs, studying the real ET material science, physics, all of it, you're going to eventually be at a level of close to parity, where what happens is that even a very experienced operator like Jake and his guys, or me, and I've been involved in contact with ET since I was 8 years old, seeing them, and then even more intimate contact, you can be easily deceived, and this is dangerous. So this is why 30 years ago I raised the alarm bell. This is going on, but technology doesn't stand still. It's not like we got the ARV from late 50s, 60s, that Mark McCandlish's drawings, and Brad Sorensen went to this air show in 1988. That's in here.
Yeah, you have the Mama Bear and Papa Bear acorn-shaped UFOs.
Yes.
And he was shown this video, and he was with this Italian financier, and they go to this sort of back-of-the-house thing, and then they have these magneto-hydrodynamic drives underneath, and so...
Yeah, but the hangar at Norton, which has been decommitted, 88, that was an air show to get more money from the Reagan-era people. And there were three of them. There was the baby, the mama, and the granddad.
Exactly.
And those three, that was real. But you know when those were built?
When were they built?
Late 50s, early 60s.
Well, they had a lot of wear and tear on them, according to Brad Sorensen.
The interior, I have a full transcript of Brad Sorensen talking to an aerospace writer. And those components on the inside were from the Mercury space capsule era.
Wow.
Late 50s, early 60s.
But then James Allen, the creator of the movie about Mark McCandlish, 0 Point or whatever. He died of an aggressive form of cancer, and they found heavy metals in his autopsy. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh
with
yeah.
that.
I mean, look, a lot of people on my team. I was me and my best friend and assistant at the time, and a member of Congress all got aggressive metastatic cancers.
Jesus.
And yeah, I almost died. I had metastatic
sorry, man.
malignant melanoma.
You think that was brought on by this
Oh
topic?
yeah, absolutely. We know how it's done.
So-
I've gone through hell, but but the point I'm making is the folks involved in these programs who want to come forward, they are at some significant risk until the government of the good guys, let's say, in government representing we the people who aren't read into this, stand up an operation to stop it. Because otherwise it's an unchecked rogue power with unbelievably malicious intent. And, you can't let that go on it's been going on for 70 years.
Yeah.
Can't go on for another 10. I don't think it can go on for another 5. This is why I think, whether you love or like him, the current president and that administration is going to have to deal with this,
If we're at technological parity,
whether they like it or not.
if we're at technological parity with these extraterrestrials, how can we be sure that the crashes that, or not even crashes, the vehicles that Jake Barber and his team retrieved were in fact of extraterrestrial origin, the egg and the 8-gon at these test ranges in California? If we're at parity and it's hard to distinguish, how do we know?
Well, you have to actually get to the point where who's on board, and is it a man-made alien or a real one? Because we have man-made ones that are both robotic and partially biological.
Is there anything about his testimony that makes you confident that, I think he seems very sophisticated and
Oh
experienced.
no, he has definitely dealt with retrieving the non-human, but he's also has seen the testing of the man-made ones.
Okay. And
Okay.
so it's his
And so-
experience with both that gives him conviction.
Yes.
And then it's hard to say because a lot of the stuff is classified as far as the differences or whatever. Because I'm just trying to think through it first principles for me. And
Right.
I'm like, I don't.
And I go
don't-
through the same
yeah.
algorithm when I'm out there with my team looking at something.
Got it.
Is it real or is it Memorex, like the old commercials? Is it a well done human facsimile,
Yeah.
or is it an actual extraterrestrial vehicle or
Yeah.
NHI craft?
Yeah.
Now, the best way to do it is if that object responds very clearly to what I call the coherent thought intention. That ain't ours. That's ET. So one of the tests we do is conscious mind matter consciousness technology interface. And if that gets confirmed, very likely it's ET. If it doesn't, I'm kind of agnostic about it and say, well, that might have been ours, it might have been theirs. And without enough data, who knows? And we have had experiences where the ETs themselves have teleported right into our circle or near our circle. We have a couple great photographs of them.
Why are you so controversial? I tweeted today that I'd be speaking to you. I was very excited for this. For me, this was a long time coming. I was really excited to just dive deep with you. And I want to say most people were pretty positive on Twitter, but there was a subset of people that were like, ask him about the flares at the CE5 thing. Like you see, put up.
Yeah, that was put out. I'm going. I don't know anyone who's ever done that at any of our events, and I certainly haven't.
So you're on record. That's fake, according to you. That's fake.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. But here's what's going to happen. Anything like that could be an orb. If you want someone who wants to defame you to say, oh, well, that was something Greer paid someone. First of all, I don't have the assets to do that. And secondly, I've never done something like that. You put me under a sodium pentothal. But those things are put out there to discredit someone who's actually telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that's what they don't want to hear. They want you to tell a partial truth that comports with the false disclosure. So there's two disclosures trying to happen. There's the actual truthful disclosure, and there's the truth that serves the secret agenda. In 1999, go look it up, I wrote a paper, and it's called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy. So when a disclosure is spun in the direction a la Elizondo, a la Sheehan, a la Gary Nolan, a la...
Sheehan? You don't like Sheehan?
Well, he was our lawyer, but then he went over to Elizondo.
Oh. Would you ever debate Elizondo?
Oh, sure, no problem.
I think he's going to be in town tomorrow.
Yeah, all the time.
Do you have any
I'm on
interest?
another show, and then I fly out tomorrow night, and
Okay.
I'm injured. So,
Okay.
But this is I don't know if you showed this when Mr. Herrera was there.
Oh yeah, he had a model of this.
Oh, good,
actually.
good, good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
really
just
cool.
so to-
Yeah.
So this is one of the cases in this new book. By the way, everyone can order this. It's hard and
Super
soft copy.
cool. That's an awesome book.
Yeah, yeah.
And Michael Schratt is a great illustrator
Researcher.
and researcher.
No, he didn't do the illustrations.
Oh, he didn't do the
No,
illustrations?
those were
Oh.
done by a professional artist.
Okay, okay.
And some of them he had done before we had.
Well, he
paid
helped
to get
organize your archive, right? And he's
Yes.
former Lockheed Martin.
Yep. Yeah, but not doing this stuff. He was drafting and doing stuff that conventional.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Schratt was not part of the Skunk Works.
Got it. Got it.
By the way,
Yeah.
Jim Goodall's a friend of mine, and he probably was the last man to talk to
Ben Rich.
Ben Rich before he died. And
Yeah.
he said, Ben Rich said, anything you can imagine that you've seen on Star Trek and this and that, we already have done at the Skunk Works. And then he said, it's not at Area 51, it's out in the desert there.
If you want to talk regarding Jim Goodall, I'll be happy to get him on the phone right this very second if you want to. We'll do this live.
Let's call
All
him.
right, do it.
This is awesome.
Hey, Jim, are you there? Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So just a quick review. I'm doing this in real time. I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm with Jesse Michels. I'm doing an interview. We were talking about John Lear. We were talking about your good friend at you know where. So could you talk about, paraphrase here, talk about what Ben Rich told you at the hospital just before he passed away?
Just before Ben Rich passed away, when I was talking to him, he told me, and this is at the end of a 45-minute conversation, he said, Jim, we have things out in the desert, and he wasn't referring to Area 51. We have things out in the desert that is 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. Now, I can comprehend a hell of a lot. And he said, if you've seen movies like Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort.
I've been to that site. I have videotape and photographs from my iPhone flying in a chopper over the Lockheed Skunk Works site where the man-made stuff comes up.
Wow.
So when I gave that to Senate Intelligence Committee in September of 23, about a year and a half ago, about 3 weeks later, someone sawed through the bolt that holds my mountain bike seat on, and it fell, and I went down, and my left leg came off. My foot came off. You see the pictures. And these two bones are in the air. My left shoulder was ripped off, and my right lower abdomen was split open. I had 4 surgeries in 3 months.
That was an attempt on your life.
And who knows? I mean, somebody messed with that. So, but, I went through rehab and physical therapy, and I'm back working out, and I was fine till this happened because I leg press 700 pounds, and I work out hard.
700 pounds? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I work out. I mean, I'm an old guy, but I try to stay strong. Most
You're
of the people
70 and your bench, your leg pressing.
Yeah, in June I'll be 70. In June 28th,
That's
I turn
impressive,
70.
man.
So I just work out hard, but luckily because I work out hard, I was in good enough shape that the rehab period, it was hard. And because I had no arm or leg, I was in a wheelchair. And anyone who knows me knows I'm very active, and it was like that was torture. So, but I recovered and been fine till my appendix ruptured yesterday. But
You don't need your appendix.
it's
a vestigial.
vestigial organ.
That's right.
Snip, snip.
That's right. I think it
When
helps.
the nurse was rolling me out last night at about 10 or whatever at the hospital, I'm in a wheelchair because I'm still kind of a little loopy from the anesthesia. And she says, have you forgotten anything? Because I had to get dressed. And I said, well, I think I forgot. Oh, I've left my appendix back there. And I said, go get my appendix. I was joking.
That's gone for good.
Oh, well,
But
we
you're
cut
gonna
up a lot. I mean, as an ER, I'll tell you, when you're dealing with major emergency trauma like I did, you got to develop a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Or you're going to eat your gun. I mean,
all you have.
this stuff, when you deal at this level, you got to have a sense of humor.
I mean, yeah.
And you got to have fun.
Yeah.
And you got to have, I mean, my assistant here, Raven, and is an angel. She's 27 years with me. My wife and I, 46 years together.
Congratulations.
I have dear friends that I've been with for 50 years. So, you have to develop a support team.
Yeah.
A network of people who, and you have to learn to have fun.
Yeah.
I'm a party animal. If you ever go out partying with, I'm wild, man.
That's funny. I feel like I've become more.
I'll be out 3 or 4 in the morning having a great time.
I've become more lame since all my, whatever partying I used to do has gone into the craziness of the topic. The topic is so crazy that I'm
you
like,
got to bring balance, man. You got to have some balance. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Balance, mind, body, spirit. You have to balance.
That's
it all.
true. Yeah. Always. Yeah. Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Everything in moderation. Oh no, I've never done any drugs or anything, but
Yeah.
I was telling someone once bought me a 3rd tequila shot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, wasn't tequila? I got so wild. It was on Halloween. I never had a tequila shot. I never drank liquor, but it was like, I was like wild man turned loose,
Well, maybe at some point we'll be partying with the ET. Who knows?
Yeah, man. They have a great sense of humor. They can be very playful and childlike, and very into high Qs. If we had a scale, 450, in that range.
Do you think they're hybrids among us?
Oh, well, look, I think all of life in the universe is a hybrid. We're going to get into something here that's very complex.
Okay.
But if you understand Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenic fields.
Oh, yeah, he's a friend of mine. I love him.
Yeah.
He's
brilliant guy.
Yeah.
So anything that starts to happen through non-locality and in the conscious field can begin to replicate. So look at the entire creation that way.
Yeah.
So I look at this from a very, conscious quantum holographic point of view, which integrates, it's integrative. Now, there's a place for reductionism where you break everything into parts. I mean, medicine, science, you have to do that. But there's a place to also bring in this more holistic and the totality of it that has to do with the conscious holography of the cosmos. And that's what's fascinating. I think civilizations that have survived this sort of crazy time we're in and have made it through the nuclear threshold and the transdimensional threshold and become peaceful. One of the reasons why I don't think they're hostile is that if you have that consciousness that humans have, you're going to destroy yourself before you get out of your solar system. Look at us on the brink of World War III with Russia and China. If you don't evolve a certain level of peaceful consciousness. So I always tell people we have a lot of problems, but the root of it is very, not religious. The root of it is social, spiritual, conscious evolution. Because if we don't evolve to a certain level of that consciousness, of peace, and seeing the oneness of life here and out there, there's no future for humanity because we're not using just muskets and bows and arrows or even whatever. Now we have weapons of mass destruction that can destroy the planet, and in these covert programs, they have technologies way beyond a hydrogen bomb that are supercharged quantum potential scalar type weapons. So you really can't go forward as a people. And I think that other civilizations have passed this way before. And if they survived that threshold, or maybe they crashed and came back out of it, they've learned a very big lesson. What I'd like to see is humanity come out of this era where we are now, instead of crashing completely, transforming into a new civilization and a new awareness about this. And I think it can happen, but we need to articulate it and sort of show that vision, that path forward. And it isn't going to happen by just continuously stirring up hatred. See, one of the alien hatred thing, what I think it is? It's an exploitation of the original sin of humans, and that's tribalism. So if you look at chimpanzees, we're 98% identical. They organize into troops and engage in war. We have that proclivity. That's where racism, homophobia, misogyny, ethnicity, all the war, everything we fight over. It's demagogues being able to trigger that impulse. Now the big one to trigger would be human versus non-human, right? And you pull the whole world together as demagogues and people wanting power against another intelligent life form.
Was that what Reagan was referring to in his speech when he said?
Yes, because he had been gaslit. I knew the people who did it.
Wow.
Colonel Homan, before he died, he was the one who sold SDI Star Wars to Reagan.
Wow.
And he told me before he died, he said, he was a full bird colonel. He had been on that committee selling Star Wars to, first tried to sell it to Carter, and Carter was too smart, didn't buy it. Then he told Reagan. So he said, we had Soviet Union, these other threats, da-da-da-da-da. And where he really got him is that he convinced him of the alien threat. Now he told me, he said, we knew that was false. But it got billions of dollars for SDI. So here's the other risk with President Trump, is that he could be shown a lot of false evidence. For example, you go in with a portfolio of gruesome vivisections and mutilations and abductions and other scary things, all done by psyops from CIA and other cutouts.
But aren't some of these pre our ability to even, like my buddy Chris Ramsey, who runs a great channel called Area 52, he's an admirer of your work and consumed it for a while, but he always points to these, he said there's like in 1904, there's like this Chilean cattle mutilation series, and it's like we didn't have the ability to do this back then, did we? In 1904?
Yeah, but see, I don't know what the evidence, how
my lab, you know.
Who knows what that was back then and what technologies were used. If you have those capabilities, what are you using it for? I mean, obviously, if they wanted to overtake the Earth and humanity, they could have done it before we had the technologies we had by the time we detonated the first atomic bomb.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no internal logic to that thesis, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of reason to believe maybe there have been other civilizations that have done things where they're monitoring our evolution because they know in the future we could be friend or foe, or we could go one way or another. And so some of this I liken to imagine if you're, well, here's a good analogy. Imagine you're me as an emergency doctor.
Yep.
Someone comes in, he's a 2-year-old child with the symptoms of meningitis, right? Which can be fatal, all right? So I have to do a spinal tap, and I have a needle this long, you know. So to the child, I'm a monster who's having my nurses hold the child down in the fetal position. They go in and get the cerebral spinal fluid off from around the spine to test it to see if there's bacterial or infection. But to the child, I'm torturing that child. I'm trying to save its life. I'm there with the best of intentions, doing everything I can to be sure this child doesn't die of meningitis or have brain damage and hearing loss. So I think we have to also be careful in taking just a empirical observation, let's say, in an ephemeral, superficial way, and ascribing motive to it, right? Because think of how many things I've had to do as a doctor.
Doesn't that flip the other way too, though? Like, how can we know they're positive on the, you know what I mean?
Because, as I said, the colonel in charge of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base operations for this, Colonel Canola, when he said to me that, he said, oh, I went from the Rockefeller Ranch to there.
Wow. He was head of the Foreign Technology
FTD. Well, at that time it was called FASTIC, the Foreign Aerospace Science and Technology Center. They keep changing the name of it.
So you spoke to him directly?
Oh, yeah. That meeting was ordered by the head of intelligence, Joint Staff, not Kramer, but another one, not Tom Wilson, but Admiral Kramer ordered that meeting.
You've met with all these fascinating people. I don't know, like, you know, I'm a fan of Joe Rogan, but I don't see how anybody can just write you off. Like, you really like...
Well, no, I mean, it's threats.
That was a money thing?
It's threats and money. I mean,
or,
look, I don't know. I mean, you ask Joe, he's a neighbor of yours, you know, fine. I'm happy to go on his show anytime. I have no grudge against him. I just know that I'm blacklisted off of it.
Yeah, that's weird.
Well, who cares? I mean, you know, I can reach a lot of people other ways. But
So what was your conversation like with the head
well,
of
he thought I was coming there to see what he had. So I said, and I had my military advisor there and a guy who was a former State Department, actually CIA guy there. And this meeting had been ordered from way above his pay grade. Now, the head of Air Force intelligence didn't want to do it, but the head of intelligence, the whole Joint Staff, ordered it. I can talk about this now. So it happened. And the conversation kind of went like this. He went, well, I said, look, I'm not here to see what you have here. I already know what you have here. I have people who worked in your facility. Now, this is September of '93. So I said, I don't need to see that. I know what you have. I'm here to let you know that we have an operation, CE5 contact, close encounters of it, and we want to deconflict what we're doing with anything you and your colleagues are doing so that you don't interfere with us and we don't interfere with you. A lot of people don't know this. That was '93,
Wow.
early on.
So you kind of came to them in peace. You weren't like,
Oh, yeah.
let
yeah,
this
yeah.
all out.
Yeah, but I also said the Clinton administration is keen. He'd just taken office in January, this is September, in getting, and this may come here. So you need to be prepared to cooperate.
Yep.
And then he said at one point, well, what makes you think that these civilizations aren't a threat? The whole party line. Because, I mean, he was a colonel. He'd brainwashed like everybody else. And I go, well, we're having this conversation, aren't we? We're breathing the free air of Earth. And the fact that we're still breathing the free air of Earth, given the galactically stupid things we've been doing, targeting and downing their own craft and killing their own people. If they were hostile like you think, we'd be done.
Right.
And he just looked at me. So I said, the proof that they're not is that you and I are still breathing Earth's air.
What if they're impervious? What if it's like these biological drones where they're like, this is sort of like disposable stuff.
Well, some of them are.
Like little von Neumann replicators to probe
some
us.
are.
Yeah.
Some are organic, indigenous ET. Some are kind of robotic. They have integrated circuits in their cerebral cortex. But we have man-made grays and man-made looking ones that have that because we've studied them.
Do you believe in different alien races, the Greys,
Oh,
the
gosh.
Nordics, the reptilians, things like that? Or
Well, no, all those names are just racist appellations. I mean, remember I was talking to you before.
So it's all one?
The foundation of all of ufology is, let's say, call it interspecies racism. That's the everything that you're mouthing, they've just been able to trigger the innate racism within everybody. We're all monkeys. We all have this sort of monkey mind.
But are there ones that look different
Oh God, yeah.
characteristically?
There are dozens and dozens of them.
Okay.
I know that Clifford Stone said in the 60s.
And they're all good. All of the groups.
There's no indication any of them are hostile.
Okay.
There's indications that some of them are extremely unhappy
Okay.
with what we're doing to the planet and what we're doing to them. So, but there is a universal right to self-defense, number one. Number two, let's say you're a species been monitoring this planet for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. In a 100-year period, we go from horse and buggies to thermonuclear weapons. We go from a pristine environment that was an agricultural civilizations to an industrial civilization that suppresses the natural evolutionary breakthrough in electromagnetism to have free energy, and we're destroying the biosphere. We're killing the oceans. We have thousands of species of plants and animals going extinct. And so if the Earth had been somehow bioformed or assisted in its evolution, they would be less than amused, not with humans per se, but with the captains of human civilization. So they would be right in saying that we're mad. It's like as an emergency doctor, you can commit someone if they're a danger to themselves or other mentally ill or substance abuser. I believe that some of these civilizations view us as collectively insane, that humans, given what we're doing to the planet and to each other, and now to them, are sort of mad. Like, what the heck's going on? So I encourage people to step out of the anthropocentric, self-centered view and begin to look at the world and what we're doing through the eyes of a non-human intelligent species who would rightly be appalled at what we've been doing to the Earth and to each other. Endless world wars, the Earth's biosphere, the oceans dying, the coral reefs dying, unnecessarily, because we've suppressed the genius breakthroughs of Nikola Tesla and others in energy generation. So that a handful of uber oligarchs and control freaks can benefit from that system. Right? In the whole planet, only 0.83% of the population has any involvement with energy generation at any level, green or otherwise. And for that, we're sending the planet over a cliff.
Have we made agreements with the aliens? Like, there's this rumor in 1954 that Eisenhower was, I think, at like Palm Desert in California, or was it Palm Springs?
I think it was 56.
56?
I might have been,
thought it was 54. Maybe
Murat.
56.
It was in Murat.
Around, yeah. And he says, you know, it was under the cover of a dental exam, but he might have actually made an agreement with some alien
It wasn't an
faction.
agreement, it was a meeting.
It was a meeting?
And what the ETs wanted us to stop the nuclear holocaust potential. And we were to then do so.
Do you believe this? Do you think this happened?
Well, I got a series of reports from the French Ministry of Defense indicating that meeting did happen, but it wasn't the mythology you're referring to. And it was really an attempt by the ETs before we went full-on dangerous proliferation of tens of thousands of thermonuclear weapons to try to change that direction. And Eisenhower was inclined to do so. This cabal of warmongering sociopaths like Alan Dulles and Paul Mellon said, no, we're not. And they're the ones who then cut the president out of the loop. This is why one of our whistleblowers was a young Army guy at the White House under Eisenhower in the Signal Corps, I think 59, 60, named Stephen Lovkin. You can read his testimony in our material. And he said that Eisenhower would doodle pictures of these, you know, ET craft, and he was fascinated. And he brought the issue up to Eisenhower and said, Eisenhower said, well, I don't have control of this anymore. So I think that because Eisenhower, he knew the dangers of endless war. He had been a 5-star general in World War II. And he wanted peace. I think he wanted a golden age. And I think about the time, I was born in 55. I think this happened in, could have been 54 or 56. But around that time, this could have all gone another way, you see. So what a waste. And so instead, he got pushed aside. That group of sociopaths and control freaks then took over those operations, and those have been illegal operations ever since. And so the president, I think Eisenhower, what I understand, died a very bitter man about this. He never spoke of this in particular, but he also knew that there was an organization that had moved him to the side. Jack Kennedy said the same thing to Bill Holden, the chief steward on Air Force One. I have many data points for this. And so, you know, my concern is, you know, how long can that continue with an unchecked group with that kind of power? I don't think it can go on much longer because their technological prowess has reached a point that it's not only a threat to Earth, it's a threat out there. And so I think we have to resolve it. My recommendation is to resolve it peacefully.
Well, let's see what happens, Dr. Greer. I mean, we have, we're kind of on the verge of like this deep politics civil war right now. It feels like with U.S. aid and Elon and Trump on one side and kind of bureaucracy on the other side, they're really clashing. And so it's an interesting time. And I hope that all of the political capital spent on all the other disclosures do not cut against UFOs. And in fact, they cascade into UFOs. So
here's what I think.
Take there, yeah.
I think all of that's a sideshow and a waste of time. Here's what I think. You know, it's fiddling while Rome burns. So all those other things, I'm not saying there's all manner of corruption and waste and fraud, but the big one is this stuff.
UFOs.
It's the
Well,
now,
maybe
this is where 8 to 12 trillion minimum is gone. Yeah. And it's still going.
Yeah.
And So the question is, you want to get serious about this? Same thing with the criminalizing illegally using the criminal justice system against people. You know, and also letting people get away literally with murder and abductions and kidnapping. One of our whistleblowers whose case is in here, who we don't name, he's by an initial. He was on a crash retrieval team in the northern Nevada desert, way north. It used to be called the Nevada Test Range. And about, I think it was 2009, somewhere around there, he was on a team retrieving these objects. And it's a very long story, but cut a long story short, when he reached out to us, I was going to bring him to Senate Intelligence and Armed Services and then over to Aero. And we're in the process of actually getting his ticket.
Yeah.
So those of you who kvetch about the fact you have to pay money for this book like you do a latte at Starbucks, I'm retired and I don't get money from all this. It's paying for whistleblowers to go to DC and provide security and all that. So, you know, all these, the naysayers and say, why is there a tuition? I said, well, how do you put on something? If it costs $200,000 to run a facility to put on an event, who's paying for that? Me, I'm a doctor, not a tech billionaire. Anyway, you know, but so we're getting his ticket, we're bringing him to DC. A van pulls up, SUV out in front of his house. His wife's at work, and they have 2 young kids, boys. And they say, look at your phone and your computer. And they had embedded child pornography all over it.
No way.
Yep, happens all the time. They said, you take one more step towards this. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison and never see your children. So I have said this to people in law enforcement. I said, why should someone who's a hero of the country be afraid for his life and afraid of false imprisonment and entrapment? Where is our justice systems? Where's the Department of Miss Bondi? Where, and Kash Patel, where is federal law enforcement? When you have this kind of thuggery, but we've had this thuggery used against even folks like the senior investigators for Senate Intelligence Committee. So at what point does someone grow a pair and stand up to the Goliath? Now, granted, it is a Goliath, and they have enormous power and enormous technology, and they're very corrupt, and they're ruthless. They will kill their own. But I don't think that that is any excuse for putting your tail between your legs and running away like a coward.
Maybe Elon's engaging in some sort of encirclement strategy where you go for the less important stuff first, and then you know,
yeah, maybe. I mean, look,
I
I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know Mr. Musk, and I wish him well. And what I do know is that there are very senior people around the president who are taking this seriously, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And there are some wonderful people in there, like RFK Jr.'s son's wife,
Amaryllis Fox.
Amaryllis Fox Kennedy,
Yeah.
is a friend of mine, and she's she's on the White House Intelligence Advisory Group now, and I will also work closely with Tulsi Gabbard,
Yeah,
who's the DNI.
I've met Tulsi before, and I think she's great. And then I've heard great things about Amaryllis Fox too.
Oh,
so,
she's Amaryllis is wonderful. She's very smart. She understands everything we've been talking about, and I think RFK Jr. does too in my conversations there, but not at a granular level, not at a But I think there are people in place who I think can help guide the administration to what the facts are and what the truth is. But more importantly, we need to get past this thing of just endlessly yakking and investigating the issue.
Yeah.
We need action.
No, I'm with that.
Yeah, we have to. At some point, the federal government of the United States and others are going to need to take action to get those operations under control, stand down the malignant ones that are targeting ET craft and victimizing other humans with abductions, mutilations, threats. And then we also need to have somebody with enough vision to say, wow, well, if we're not alone in the universe, maybe we should reach out. I mean, Mr. Trump reached out to Putin and Zelensky. Maybe we need to learn to reach out to out there. So let's reach out to these civilizations and begin a rapprochement and a dialogue That's the whole concept. The reason I started this whole project was for that reason.
On that beautiful
And I
note.
got diverted into these other things. But that's
Yeah.
the real purpose is let's go forward in a world where we're at peace
Yeah.
and we're in peace in space. We've transformed our whole civilization into a new high-tech society, and poverty vanishes within a generation. I mean, live to see it. You will. My children will. And let's have a new world.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Let's move forth into a utopia, not hit the great filter, let out all this suppressed technology,
Yep.
and commune with the extraterrestrials. Thank you so much
Let's
for your
get
time,
together.
Dr.
Yep,
Greer.
thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. This was an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah.